With eyes wide open in horror, Takasugi Takashi staggered from the sudden, shocking realization. In his head echoed one panicked question: what the hell is happening? In his head suddenly flashed the moment when everything changed. He was walking to the school gates and thought that his cursed school life had finally ended. But now he suddenly found himself in the middle of the opening ceremony without any explanation, and worse, everything was strangely familiar, surrounded by faces that seemed familiar from somewhere. Suddenly everything falls into place. This is the introduction of the very game he was about to launch. In his mind flashed the image of the main characters of the game. He sits stunned in the huge hall. The banner in clear font says the entrance ceremony of the Sakura Academy, and looking at the crowd of students, he perceives this whole scene as complete absurdity. He realizes this impossible truth no matter how he looks at it. This is undoubtedly the opening scene of that super popular VR game he had long planned to play. Suddenly a memory surfaced in his head about the guide he had bought in advance. He recognized this very scene on its pages, although he hadn't even started the side job to pay for it yet. His thoughts, swirling in a whirlpool, were interrupted by a loud voice from the stage. The academy director greets them, calling them young people who will risk their lives and serve the country. Takasugi could only watch, stunned. The director's words echo another legend from the game. Takasugi recalled that around 1930, the dungeon's gates to other worlds suddenly began to appear. And when he looks at the building of the academy, suddenly the most important detail emerges. Their ancestors built Cherry Blossom Academy right above one of those dungeons. His mind raced, piecing together a grim picture of his situation, and he recalled from game knowledge that after the Imperial Army's retreat, this place had been repurposed. It was no longer a military base, but a school for researchers. And he understood with a weight in his chest that this was the very essence of the game he had now entered. The world was forever turned upside down when dungeons appeared. The monsters there were incredibly strong, but they dropped magical stones and other valuable items, resources of such power that they completely changed the balance of power throughout the country. Because of this, a fierce struggle for dungeon resources broke out all over the world, and the academy itself turned into a ruthless battlefield for influence and power. Researchers who obtained these items were sincerely honored in the country, and the strength from victories over monsters could be measured and displayed in the form of a level. Eventually, the highest-level researchers received all the wealth and fame they dreamed of and became true national heroes. A young man with light hair, Furuta Masao, was the true embodiment of a celebrated hero, waving to the admiring crowd. Even he felt the heavy truth in the director's words. When the teachers said they risked their lives in the name of serving the country, it was not an exaggeration at all. The main character recalled the guide he bought. It clearly revealed the grim truth. Everyone knows that some people die fighting monsters in the dungeons. Once when this fatalistic thought flashed through his mind, his gaze ran through the crowd and fell on a familiar figure. He froze. He looked at her. A gentle smile played on her lips in the background. He remained unnoticed, just an observer. The name struck his consciousness like a blow. Shinguji Ayano. He recognized her instantly, one of the main romantic heroines of that game, which he knew like the back of his hand. His thoughts turned to the academy itself. Here lessons were strictly divided by ability from A to D, and the top 3 levels were almost like in a regular school. Those at the top, like the students of 1A, were not ordinary. They had already descended into the dungeons, gaining precious experience and raising their level. And this system threw him into the worst position. His fate was limited, seats were assigned by rank, and he ended up at the very end. From the moment of enrollment, he was sent to Class D. He was sitting in his seat when suddenly a book was placed on his desk. He looked down in surprise and saw a strategy guide with the cover loudly proclaiming complete introduction to the strongest. You can become a character. Doctor, his eyes widened in disbelief. It was the very same strategy guide he had bought, and he had completely lost himself in his work. His shock was so deep that he did not hear the instructor calling him. Hey, Takasugi, the teacher shouted, persistently asking if he could be F. Hearing this, he flinched and raised his head from his seat. Furuta Masao mockingly called him a weirdo for staring at an empty book. I'm here, Takasugi stammered and replied. Official records about Takasugi Takashi paint a grim picture. A loser, a student with the worst grade in Class 1D, destined to become the main hero's opponent, suffered defeat in a duel and be forced to leave the academy. Then rumors circulated that after leaving he died. His stats were extremely low and he posed no real threat, and the fact that he was accepted despite the obvious lack of talent evokes deep sympathy. figure, he grimaced, boiling with the realization of his predetermined fate, regretting that he was reincarnated into a game world only to become a minor character quickly crossed out from the plot. The guide described his role as one that evokes sympathy after the inevitable fight with the main hero and death, and seeing this grim scenario, he decided to stay as far away from the main hero as possible, up to the pop. Maybe, but as he stared into the strategy book, a new thought flashed in him like a mad hope. Could this book become his chance to change his life? He imagined another path where, using its secrets, he could become the strongest in this world and be surrounded by beautiful girls, who supposedly swarmed the academy. His daydream was interrupted when the teacher at the front of the class raised a rough, smartphone-like device and announced that now each student would be given one. An excited whisper ran through the class as the devices began to be handed out. Students huddled in groups, staring at the impressive numbers on the screens. In a moment, one of the devices was in Takasugi's own hands. The device beeped, the screen lit up, and Takasugi recognized a familiar figure across the room. The game's main hero was already standing, surrounded by a group of admiring girls. There was no mistake. On the screen, his own status flickered: Takasugi Takashi, level 1. His class level 1 student with 10/10's HP and 5/5 senpai. The base stats were Strength 9, Magic 12, Agility 7, Endurance 13, and Z. He looked at the information, confused. Apprentice, he said aloud, not understanding what this title meant. Suddenly it dawned on him. He realized something profound. Just as he read his indicators from the device, he began to clearly imagine them in his head. The words Level 1 Apprentice flashed in his mind. He had no idea how it was possible. He understood that it was not just about his level. In his thoughts, he could extract information about his skills, equipment, and even class change, and while trying to comprehend this incredible ability, a sharp voice broke his concentration. Hey. Hey, scoundrel! Startled, Takasugi turned and saw a hooligan with a pompadour, who now loomed over him with a threatening, predatory look. He smiled crookedly and leaned over Takasugi's table, looking at the device screen with a cruel sneer, mocking and asking what miracle allowed such a pathetic set of indicators to get here, and Takasugi just stared back, stunned, and could only say. Without words, even before Takasugi could come to his senses, the hooligan snatched the device right off the table. He loudly declared that he had never seen any characteristic with unambiguous numbers and asked if Takasugi was cursed. Sudden aggression made another student nearby. The device screen showed the profile of the hooligan himself, Furuta Masao, a student with strength, magic, agility, endurance, and willpower indicators all around 30. These numbers stunned Takasugi, and he realized with horror that if this hooligan was not a hero, then these impressive numbers were just mediocre. His humiliation was only beginning. Furuta Masao turned back to the class, raised Takasugi's device for everyone to see, and laughed, calling everyone to look at the incredible indicators of the newcomer from the other end of the room. Even the student whom Takasugi considered a hero, Glant F. Swirled above him, the weight of public mockery fell on him. Takasugi clenched his teeth, sweat ran down his forehead, and he endured. Shame. He sank into the chair, confidence shattered to pieces. He did not understand what he was thinking, dreaming of becoming the strongest, feeling like a nobody. His gaze fell on an old strategy manual he had brought with him, the cover promising a path to becoming the best. Staring at the book, he suddenly felt a thought, and the mockery of the other students receded into the background, their voices branding him as one who would soon die a tree. Trash. His eyes widened. He scanned a certain section of the guidebook. That one single possibility jumped out and made him doubt the haste. The fastest. This question ignited a crazy fire in him. A wide, anxious smile spread across his face, and suddenly he realized, with the knowledge from this book, he could become SDR. The strongest. A quiet chuckle escaped from his throat as a plan matured in his mind. Yes, he thought, extending his device like a gift. Here, but his idea was interrupted because suddenly a hand with a noticeable bracelet chain reached out and took the device. He jumped up and raised his eyes. Standing before him was the one who took his device. A girl with long dark hair in an elegant uniform, who handed him the academy's device and with a calm expression asked if it was his. It belongs to him. His eyes widened with stunned recognition. He definitely knows who she is and suddenly realizes, this girl is Shinguji Ayano. Takeshi Takasugi stood, not believing his eyes. Before him was the girl he instantly recognized, Hanagasaki Rika. Scenes from the game's promotional materials flashed through his mind. He remembered she was the most popular among romantic characters in surveys and that he had even seen her in a TV commercial. He continues walking, a drop of sweat appears on his temple, and he barely realizes that she is really here. He squinted and sharply glanced down at the device in his hand. The realization hit him with full force. She saw his stats. He recoiled, as if howling inside from unbearable shame. Her face softened a little, and she told him that this device is important and he should try not to lose it. And with that, she turned away, leaving him sitting at the desk in the now quiet classroom. The profile in his guide reveals who Hanagasaki Rika is. She is the heiress of the large Hanagasaki holding known as Hanasama or Rikasama. At the start, she has incredible equipment and a destiny to become a magical specialist. They say when she blushes it's cute, but usually she is a true ice queen, so she is beautiful but an unattainable essential ally for the magical team. She leaned on the railing and smiled broadly and joyfully. She is so popular that even he, who never played that game, had heard of her, and just being in the same class with her seemed like a real victory to him. Joy fades when he reviews the book again. It reminds him of the cruelty of the world. Here death is forever, and even members of his squad can perish irreversibly, not to mention his own fate. Grabbing the book, he resolutely decides to use its knowledge. This bitter truth hardens his resolve. His facial expression becomes stone-like, and he silently vows to become strong no matter what. New determination led him to a place called the Hall of the Champion's Emblem. The interior resembled a medical station, but it was clear its purpose was quite different. There were already several students in the room. Some were just receiving intricate tattoos from masters, and Takasugi stood before one of them, a dark-haired man in strange glasses. Nearby, a woman was carefully drawing a large, thorny pattern in ink on the back of another student who patiently lay on a cot. But it was the man in glasses who was assigned to Takasugi. He sat on the adjacent bed and looked at the boy with a cold, appraising gaze. Raising the tattoo machine, he asked where Takasugi wanted the mark. Noticeably nervous, Takasugi, stammering, asked for it to be done in the usual place. Obeying the instruction, Takasugi took off his shirt and lay face down on the bed, showing his back to the practitioner. As he was about to start, the man sneered that Takasugi was trash and should feel honored. He boasted about a contract with a prestigious guild and called the mark he was about to apply the champion's emblem. They say this tattoo system allows people to learn special spells. Each tattoo is a magical sign that enables the bearer to use a unique form of magic. After the procedure, Takasugi looked in the mirror at his new champion's mark and felt a slight doubt. Was it right to get it from such an arrogant person? His strategy guide did not say who should apply the mark, so he tried to convince himself that since he had the required lightning sign, everything was fine. Meanwhile, in another classroom, Shingiji Ayano found herself the center of attention. She held a small shining object that enchanted. The girls gathered around, and one of them looked at her with wide eyes full of wonder. She sits among classmates, among them Furuta Masao. Her nervousness is felt as they gather around the book, as if planning their own adventure. Elsewhere, Takasugi Takashi feels a harsh warning from a school bully. An older student contemptuously says that no one will join his team and no help should be expected. Help! The bully and his friend announce that the time for the after-school raid in the dungeon has finally come, and Takasugi, tightly clutching his strategy guide, decides to follow its instructions exactly. He walks through empty school corridors, heading to his first target. Entering the locker room, he confirms his suspicion with a quick glance. He is completely alone. Alone, step by step following the guide's instructions, he approaches a certain locker and opens it with a decisive snap. Inside, on the metal floor, lies a single 50-yen banknote. He picks up the bill and is stunned to realize the guide was right. Although it seems insignificant, in this world it is worth about 100 times more than in real life, and the thought of theft, even in this seeming game reality, oppresses him, but for now he has no choice. He must follow the strategy. Having decided on the plan, he finds the machine indicated by the guide and inserts the 50 yen. The machine dispenses a strangely large number of scrolls. Pleased with the loot, Takasugi gathers the finds and prepares for the next move. He clenches the scroll in his hand, determination hardens, and with a resolute shout he names where he is heading. Dungeon. His goal is a fenced-off area in the academy yard, surrounded by a simple construction fence and a small shed. Behind the fence, stone stairs lead down to heavy, barred wooden doors embedded in the ground. Entrance to the first. In front of the dungeon gates, he checks the guide for the first day once more, and the first instruction in it is so strange. First, you need to hit yourself as much as possible with lightning spells. The text explains that this is a necessary, though boring, leveling of a hidden magic resistance stat, vital for a swordsman, and warns that if you don't do this now, you won't be able to raise it later, and at a low level you can be killed with one hit. Levels. The hint talks about the bolt spell lightning magic he acquired thanks to the champion's crest. Scroll. He enters the stone corridor, looks around. There is no enemy nearby, just as the guide said. Suggested, he takes a deep breath, stretches out his hand to his body, and with a wild gleam in his eyes, shouts the spell. The air crackles with electricity, arcs of lightning burst from his outstretched fingers and strike him directly. The force of the blow throws him back, and he looks at the charred mark on the stone wall where he frozen. A moment later, a wide-open, victorious, relieved expression plays across his face. He, breathless, realizes that the strange strategy worked. He slowly decides to start, deciding to immediately level up his secret stat. Summoning his will, he casts the spell on himself. At the same time, a strong electric discharge envelops his body, and he screams agony. Wild force pushes him, and he crashes onto the stone floor. His body convulses from the shock, his face a mask of pure torment. After the first convulsive jerk, he lies motionless on the ground, gasping heavily, and smoke rises from him. He rises to a sitting position, still breathing in ragged gasps. The shock of what he experienced overwhelms him, his heart nearly stopped, and he realizes with horror that he was truly close to death. Until death, he recalls his guidebook. It clearly states that the spell arrow causes paralysis. Realizing his condition, he falls to his knees, crushed by despair, and asks himself if he really has the strength to endure this unbearable pain again and again. Repeatedly, despite his doubts, a spark of determination ignites again. Gathering courage, he decides to do it once more and throw the spell. Familiar pain overwhelms him. He grits his teeth and endures the electric shock, groaning in pain. He examines what happened to his leg. The flesh is clearly burning and smoke rises from it. It is a serious wound, no doubt, but he notices that the pain is by no means as strong as F. For the first time, after enduring the pain for about 5 minutes, he suddenly felt he had recovered. Looked down, the burn had completely disappeared, and he realized it was due to the enhanced buff from the ether inside. In the dungeon, he subjected himself to lightning again. His body twitched as wild energy ran through him. Agony threw him to the floor. He lay there, gasping for air. The pain was so unbearable that he felt he would go mad if this continuation. Realizing that this could not go on, he suddenly remembered a passage from his strategic guide. The book said that in this world there are protective items, rings that, as it turned out, could reduce sustained damage. Having a new goal, he headed to the approach to the Academy's tool storage. Approaching the counter, he saw a woman behind a glass partition hand him a wrapped package and say that it was his, he could keep it, and there was no need to return it. He took the package and walked away. His curiosity piqued, and he unwrapped it. He found a simple ring and suddenly realized that it was S. Ring of Slime. He was examining it when suddenly a group of students passed through the corridor. The hero Furuta Masya himself, surrounded by several popular girls, among whom were Shinguji Ano and Hanagasa. Rieka, his breath caught in his throat. To his great surprise, Shinguji Ano turned her head and looked at. They were looking straight at him. He froze, thoughts swarming in his head. Could their gazes have just met? He wondered how he looked in their eyes. Popular kids of the academy. Shaking off that moment, he returned to the dungeon. After all, he was just an outsider. He decided there was nothing to be done if he attracted a little attention. His training. He had to keep going. He continues training, his face and hands covered in dirt, holding the NeverQuest guidebook in one hand, clenching his fist in triumph with the other, the slime ring on his wrist clearly working. All right. He shouts with a wild gleam of determination in his eyes and realizes that despite all the difficulties, he is truly lucky. In the training yard, surrounded by stone walls, Takasugi Takashi stands alone, gathering energy. He releases a simple spell, a magic bolt. A drop of sweat rolled down his face as a surge of power came to him. He felt more and more confident that this was much better than before and thought that he could finally do it. He directs the energy and his leg ignites as sparkling power envelops it. This was what his training looked like. For 2 hours straight, he cast the bolt spell at his own leg, carefully watching the remaining health points. He recalls that at first the perfect evasion skill never worked, but now, after exhausting training, he feels that something has changed. Standing ready right in front of him from a puddle on the stone floor appears a jelly-like creature with simple eyes, slime. Without any warning, the slime lunged forward, throwing itself straight at him. Takasugi's eyes widened with alarm at the sudden ambush. The creature hits the target, knocking him back. He coughs, his body aches from the blow, and with horror realizes he has only 1 health point left. The slime is already preparing to strike again. Immediately, he pulls a small bottle from his jacket. With a light pop of the cork, he quickly drinks the potion. A healing light envelops him, signifying full recovery. He gratefully recalls Master Tony's advice, "You can die if you don't bring the potion." Just as he is gathering his courage again, a sound off-screen makes him jump. He continued training, mindlessly working on increasing his resistance to magic, and dodging the occasional slimes attacking him, repeatedly cast bolt. Today's training was over, and he was returning to the student dormitory under the night sky. He stepped over the threshold of the common area where several other students Furuta Maso, Shingaji Ayano, and Hingasaki Rika had already gathered around a large screen. Everyone's attention was fixed on the image of a formidable warrior woman in exquisite armor and helmet. She wielded a huge sword and shield, her face showing sharp concentration. On the screen, she was engaged in a fierce battle, seemingly effortlessly repelling attacks from a monstrous beast, while Furuta watched nearby. One of the students watching shouted that the warrior was brushing off attacks as if nothing had happened, and the man next to him clarified that she was from the night class and that the Ijuin Kyuku Guild was incredible. Takasugi froze, staring at the display. His face showed pure admiration, and only one thought was in his mind: how incredible she was. Her image of strength lingered with him long after he returned to his room and lay in bed. He wondered if he would ever be able to become as strong. It stunned him. His thoughts soured when he considered his own weakness, and it seemed to him that people avoided him perhaps because of such pitifully low stats. A terrible realization overwhelmed him, his face twisted with anxiety. If it continued like this, he feared he would be expelled for weakness, and this thought horrified him. The next day, the students of the Sakura Academy gathered in the courtyard before the grand entrance to the underground structure, and the instructor stood before them, ready to begin today's lesson. When everyone had gathered, the instructor announced that today's lesson was finally the long-awaited descent into the dungeon. Upon hearing this, Takasugi felt a surge of confidence, believing that thanks to his strategy guide, he was fully prepared. He clutched the guidebook in his hands and prayed that it contained accurate information. A brief flash of doubt ran through his mind. What if something happened that wasn't in the game? Anxiety grew when he noticed a critical detail. The date of the entrance ceremony in the guidebook was shifted by a day. His thoughts were interrupted when the instructor gave the order. With a smile, he commanded them to reach the second floor and return, and sent the students into the dark maw of the dungeon. An important piece of advice from the guidebook surfaced in Takasugi's mind. Stick close to the other students, that way you can return alive without even engaging in battle, so he decided to stay with the group. His gaze settled on the strongest students in the class. The device showed that Shingaji Ayano was already level 5, Hanagasaki Rika level 6, while the main character's party was only level 4. While he was surveying the others, a rough hand grabbed him by the collar. It was the same bully who had harassed him earlier. The boys stared at Takasugi's device with distrust and roared that it couldn't be possible for him to still be level 1 when almost everyone else was at least level 3. At the moment the bullies tightened their grip, a calm voice cut through the tension. An attractive blonde student stepped forward, looked directly at Takasugi with a gentle smile, and offered to help him even the odds. Level increased. Before Takasugi could respond, the academy director appeared, placed a hand on his shoulder, and named the one who helped him Ikiju Kazuma, and that name struck Takasugi like a physical blow. Stunned, Takasugi stammered and refused. Now he understood everything. Ikiju Kazuma was the true hero of the game, handsome and powerful, with high stats and the ability to use special magic. Next to him, Takasugi felt worthless, and Ikiju accepted the refusal with dignity and said to let him know if he ever needed help. He stands stunned, and that's how it should be, Kazuma says, explaining. For the sake of the upcoming class competition exam, it's not in everyone's interest to make the weakest student strong. A hooligan with a mohawk who previously behaved hostilely now pushes Takasugi to accept the offer, and Ikiju adds that his squadmate Kazama Yuji is also ready to back him up. Contact them if needed. Help is needed. Takasugi inside notices how the hooligan suddenly softened and tells him not to act cute just because the main character is nearby. He shrugged off their concerns and insisted on being left alone because he knows he can't raise his level yet, and all he can do is follow the strategy. Having made a decision, he turned around and rushed forward with new determination, running through the academy corridors and exiting the main building. School is over for today. He clenched his fist and shouted that it was time to level up his hidden skills. He sneaks to the stone training ground and hides behind a column. Peeking out, he prepares, whispering the name of the spell. Projectile. When the energy projectile hits the wall where he just stood, he rejoices at the perfect dodge, realizing he didn't get a scratch. Damage. Training continues. A small slime monster crawls into view and lunges at him, and he feels pride noticing that his skill grows. The slime rushes at him, but he dodges again. Shocked, he suddenly realizes that these repeated dodges have unexpectedly raised his evasion skill. Missing, the slime splashed against the far wall as if defeated, but instantly took shape again and struck him from behind. Catching him by surprise, he yelped. He lifts his head in stunned silence and sees Hanagasaki Rika standing over him, holding a delicate staff ready for battle. The slimes that ambushed him have already disappeared. She looks down worriedly and asks if he is all right. He quickly composes himself, scolding himself for trembling, fearing that strange rumors will spread as if he is worried about a slime, or worse, that he will have to be rescued from it. With a forced smile, he thanks her for. She accepts his thanks with a simple nod and, seeing him alone on the training ground, asks if he needs help. Her proposal pierced him like a blow. He immediately understood attention must not be drawn. First and foremost, stay away from the main characters of the game, such as her. He fears that if he interferes with the path of the main hero, he might lead the world astray. To destroy, he turns away from her and sharply says that he wants nothing. She insists, asking what he wants. He insists that if she wants nothing, she should leave him alone. Rieka says she was just checking the place because she heard voices and that everything is fine as long as he is safe. She does not take her eyes off him and directly asks, has he already leveled up? He, sweating, admits that no. He quickly gets ready and insists that it is not hard for him at all and he can handle one on his own. Rieka looks at him surprised and says that if it is hard for him, he can simply ask someone to help level up to fight alone, and he realizes that this no longer looks like a loner but just stubborn and decides to end the conversation. Quickly, after a short pause, she seems to have accepted his refusal. I understand, she says, turning to leave. This is F. Well, fine. He watched her walk away down the stone corridor and suddenly a new question arose in his mind. What was she doing here all alone? Himself, he considered the combat style from the guide as pure offense. Everything is simple: do not resist or dodge, but take all the damage, then drink potions, fully recover, and attack again. He remembered the guide Master Tony, who advised spending all money on potions and weapons, refusing armor, which was not only heavy but also did not provide protection against. Despite the clear attack strategy, a moment of hesitation flashed across his face. After all, he did not want to get injured a lot. His mind raced, running through the real consequences of this game. A blow to the stomach could cause vomiting, a blow to the head concussion, and the worst, he clearly remembered that losing in this world meant real death. Overcoming fear, he decided it was time to buy some equipment, and so, with a clear plan of action, he stepped over the threshold of the school store. In the generously stocked shop, various equipment is displayed on the counters. A mannequin is dressed in a recognizable jacket with a high collar of the Sakura Academy school uniform, and behind it in sinks lies a selection of strange masks. The shop impresses, from quirky hats and glasses to Academy-approved skirts, pants, and original shirts. It seems you can assemble any gear to your taste here. Entering the store, Takasugi Takashi looks around excitedly and aloud marvels at the incredible selection of goods. His eyes stop on the outfit on the mannequin. A refined black jacket, light pants, fingerless gloves, and sturdy boots. He gasps loudly with admiration. Looking closer, Takasugi noticed the gear has high protection and fire resistance. With a passionate, greedy look, he understood he needed the entire set. Leaving the academy shop moments later in his new outfit, he sighs. The purchase left him completely broke, but he justifies it as a necessary sacrifice for better gear. He sees no other choice. Standing on the cobblestone courtyard, he suddenly bursts with energy and firmly plants his feet on the pavement. Energy settles around him in a thin aura. He looks at his hands with a sense of achievement and exhales excitedly, realizing that the training finally paid off. He recalls his recent efforts, over 15 hours of relentless grinding, and finally mastered the full evasion skill. He remembered the mechanics. At level 100, it gives 100 magic resistance, and each subsequent point reduces all damage by another one. His thoughts return to the present. He sits in class among classmates, the teacher stands in front, and another day begins at the Cherry Blossom Academy. He is snapped out of his thoughts when the teacher roars his name, not believing that Takasugi is still at level 1. The teacher addressed the whole class with a stern warning: you could die in these lessons. He insisted on reaching level 3 as soon as possible to avoid deadly danger, and Takasugi was outraged by the public challenge, thinking his status was none of the teacher's business. He sternly explained the academy rules. If a student below level 5 dies, it is the faculty's responsibility. Although he admits some losses are inevitable, he will not allow it because he is responsible for their lives, so he decides to check the list of who has the highest level. His gaze stops on a reserved young woman with long dark hair. He calls her by name Hanagasaki. The teacher gives her a direct task. Now she must bring Takasugi to level 3 by Monday. She accepts the task without protest, her face is calm and she simply replies, "Yes, understood." Her quiet consent ripples through the class in a wave of whispers and murmurs as the other students react to this unexpected pair. Pompadour boy looks on in wonder, wondering why Takasugi ended up next to Hanagasaki. Takasugi himself is boiling with anger inside. He doesn't understand why he is forced to level up with someone else when he has his own secret method, and he believes he should be the one to fuse. After class, Takasugi stands alone under the stone arch and sighs heavily. He looks at his device. There is a message from Hanagasaki, "Wait for me in the classroom." He ignored her request, deciding that this whole situation had become a complete mess. Instead, he came straight to the dungeon, although doubt still smolders within him. He suddenly freezes. Right in his path appears Hanagasaki Rika and asks why he is running away. Frightened, he shouts and the device almost slips from his hands. Embarrassed, he stammers that he just wants to do everything at his own pace. Hanagasaki's expression becomes stern when she recognizes him and asks if he has anything against her. She is so straightforward that he is left speechless. Then she says that he has nothing to hide because she definitely knows what he was doing hiding in the dungeon. In the dungeon, his mind reels from this revelation. He was being watched. Inside, he panics, not understanding how she could know about those hidden traits he secretly enhanced, values that people in this world shouldn't even notice. While he struggles with this impossibility, Hanagasaki carefully watches his reaction and seems to decide that she understands his situation, although she cannot know the real reason for his strange behavior. Because of her mistaken judgment, she makes a proposal. He can continue to impose Bolt on himself if he wants, but if he goes with her, she will at least help him grow a little because she believes he won't do it on his own. He sits on the stone floor, digesting her words. He directly asks her why she is doing this for him. After a moment of silence, she answers that it is necessary, but admits she cannot prove it. Her mysterious answer strengthens his conviction, and a fire lights up in his eyes as he focuses on his one secret desire to become the strongest. Hanagasaki's gaze sharpens as if she caught his unspoken thought, and she reflects his goal in the form of a question: become the strongest. His face is stone-like, his determination unwavering. A drop of sweat runs down his temple and he confirms it. Yes, he stands his ground, although something inside him fears Hanagasaki will laugh at his ambitions. But on her face is genuine surprise, her eyes wide open. She slowly comprehends his work. She comes to her senses, crosses her arms, and calls his goal wonderful, but warns it will not be easy and this is not a game. In Takasugi's soul, he disagrees, silently repeating to himself that for him this is completely a game. Her eyes narrow with anxiety. She warns him. His stubbornness may ruin her reputation. She is not sure if he is really serious or just joking. This is such a critical T. Standing a few steps apart in the stone dungeon, he notices to himself that she seems to have agreed to this partnership or work quite quickly. She thinks about it. In response to the unspoken situation, she extends a small pendant on a chain and, looking seriously, says, "I will lend you this." She became serious and explains, "This necklace restores his mana. Together with her healing his health, they will save a lot of time." She says this is a beneficial offer for him, and his shocked expression confirms it all. He barely restrains his excitement. A memory flashes quickly in his mind of Akizu Kazuma complaining about the agonizing wait for health to recover. Such an offer is something he never even dreamed of. He admits that this is really a good proposal. He stammeringly agrees, to which she sharply replies, "Exactly." Then she explains the conditions. As soon as he finishes his training, in which he harms himself, he must allow her to truly raise his level. A wave of panic covers Takasugi as he clutches his guidebook. Suddenly, he is afraid that she knows his secret. Deciding that there is no point in dwelling on fear, he walks beside her, thinking that if their plan succeeds, he will get out of this mess and her reputation will remain intact. Firmly deciding, he reaches out his hand. His fingers touch hers as he takes the pendant she offers. "I will borrow this necklace," he says, accepting her terms and her. He immediately puts the training into action, gathers energy in his hand, and releases a bolt spell that sparks and crackles against the ancient stone walls of the training ground. The effort of the spell makes him groan in pain, but before he can stagger, Hanagasaki reaches out and creates spheres of gentle healing. The glow of light covers him. Her magic washes over the body, and he freezes. He understands that his life points have been restored by Hanagasaki, and at the same time, the magic points are rapidly replenished by the power of the ethereal crystal Namasta. Restoration is impressive. He perceives this new detail with surprise. Although her main class is mage, she also has a coat of arms. His curiosity about her gift of healing flared up. He returns to her and, a little shyly, asks if she will show him her coat of arms. After a short pause, Hanagasaki agrees, but with a smile jokingly remarks to him that such frank requests should be addressed to one's girlfriend. Queens, despite the teasing, she lifts the hem of her skirt and shows a complex mark on the upper part of her thigh. Takasugi blushes and looks away, and she calmly recognizes it as the crest of the third generation, as befits a person from a noble family. She then questions him whether he really knew so much about it or was just boasting knowledge or had hidden motives. She says that this coat of arms was until recently a secret technique of one noble family. About herself, Takasugi notes her confidence and simply asks to interpret his actions as she likes it. Displeased, Hanagasaki presses on with a hint of sarcasm, asking which crest the great Takasugi, who dreams of becoming the strongest, intends to take, and adds that she would very much like to hear about it. Reference: he froze, realizing that by current world standards there are only 3 generations of healing crests. While hesitating, a vision of his determined gaming self appeared before his eyes, declaring, "I will achieve this anyway," and the truth struck him: he is going to obtain the 4th generation of the healing crest, something still unknown. It exists. He remains deep in thought, causing Hanagasaki's eye to twitch with noticeable irritation. She says that he is probably hiding something from her, then sharply declares enough, the rest will be her secret, and now suggests returning to his bolts. Her behavior changes. She reaches out her hand, her face hardens, and with a sharp tone in her voice offers to help him cast the bolt spell. Alone, he nervously refuses the frightening offer, stammering and saying that he will decline. Hanagasaki cuts in, saying that it seems he has a lot of free time, and asks why he is not focused on leveling up. Alone, she waved off his anxiety with a confident smile and told him not to worry about her. Her level, she explained, is already so high that there is no one to form a party with. Anyway, as he walks, he replays their meeting in his mind. Although Hanagasaki initially seemed inaccessible, he realizes that with her it is strangely easy to talk. This new understanding pushes them into intense training. For the next 3 days, they tirelessly work with Takasugi, late into the night, honing his hidden skills. At night, he recalls his progress during that time. His magic resistance skill, which barely grew the first 2 days, suddenly began to rise sharply on the third day. He finally understood the essence of the sun's growth. For him, a successful dodge gave skills, and skills brought even more successful dodges. This realization fueled a vicious circle. He admits that he became greedy. He decided to raise not only magical but also physical endurance. So he went down to the first floor of the dungeon in search of slimes. Now standing on that first floor, he found himself surrounded by the same slimes he had seen, and behind him Hanagasaki watches from close range. He tensed for an attack, but the slime lunged forward and hit him right in the chest with a jelly-like appendage. He yelped as the shock passed through his body, and beside him Hanagasaki remained alarmed with a worried face, realizing that the situation was much more dangerous than as expected. She raised her luxurious staff, and from its tip burst a dazzling light that unleashed a destructive avalanche of energy and instantly evaporated the entire swarm of slime around them. As the blinding light fades, Takasugi looks up in confusion at the huge dark figure now looming where the slimes had been. Hanagasaki quietly sighs with relief, believing the threat was neutralized. Her relief lasts only moments and quickly turns into an expression of burning irritation. Takasugi, still bewildered by the sudden turn of events, can only utter an inquisitive sound. Before them, the remains of the defeated slimes begin to flow and merge. Takasugi freezes in awe, watching them transform into one enormous mass, while Hanagasaki quickly starts chanting a new spell. Preparation. The process complete as a colossal slime grows, looming over them. It sways slightly, and its gelatinous surface carves a calm, almost cheerful face, making Takasugi tiny as he stands rooted to the spot. At its base, they both look up, their faces one big mirror of shock and disbelief. The confidence they had moments ago has vanished and retreated before the harsh realization they have inadvertently spawned a new, enormous threat. In the tiled chamber of the dungeon, a huge gelatinous creature looms over Takasugi and Hanagasaki. Rieka, who lie on the floor. Rieka, her face hardened with determination, cast a glance at Takasugi and sharply ordered him to retreat, accusing him of deliberately avoiding leveling up. She steps forward and stands before him like a shield, raising her decorated staff and preparing to face the creature. While Takasugi looks up at her, a drop of sweat on his face shows he is clearly surprised by her intervention. In response, the slime monster lunged forward, its body distorted and flowing, and it unleashed a quick, powerful strike. After an invisible exchange, the slippery creature recoiled, its body damaged, and liquid dripped from several eye-like spots. Rieka stands guard at the entrance to a long stone corridor with Takasugi still behind her. Suddenly, Takasugi rushes past her into the corridor and crashes into a pillar. Seeing this, Rieka turns and casts a spell directly at his back, shouting. Magic hits him point-blank, enveloping him in an aura of energy, but he stands completely unmoved by the attack. He turned to the bewildered Rieka and explained. Although her spell hit, he barely felt any pain and his skill even improved. He revealed his secret. He was raising a hidden magical resistance that only works when his own magical power is low. But with a gaze burning with confidence, he declares that now he can nullify her magic. His confession stunned Rieka, her eyes wide open in disbelief at this impossible revelation. She jumped back in horror, exclaiming that his action was a state secret and warned that if anyone else found out, they would come for him and threaten his life. Takasugi, realizing his mistake, stammered and said it was nothing, but Rieka sharply replied that he should not speak so freely about it. In his soul, he scolded himself for recklessness and for scaring her, deciding to be more careful with his knowledge. Aloud, he tried to calm her, explaining that her spirit level as a mage would increase on its own, so she did not need to use his method, and added that magical classes still raise physical resistance and evasion against slimes, so the exploit was not entirely useless for her. Conversation quieted as night fully descended on the academy courtyard, and its modern buildings gently glowed in the lantern light. Standing on the bridge from where the city lights twinkle in the distance, Takasugi said to Hanagasaki, "Good night, see you tomorrow," and she quietly agreed. Then he apologized, admitting that he made her worry and guessed correctly that was exactly why she was watching over him. Her face flushed with embarrassment, she sharply turned away, snorted, and declared that she would never worry about him, accusing him of arrogance and of ruining her mood, and abruptly announced that she was leaving. He walked away, crossed the street, and left Takasugi alone on the sidewalk. He pondered that meeting and suddenly realized. Thanks to her worry, he managed to reach the 3rd level. The status confirmed the upgrade and showed that he had mastered the general skill evaluation for the first time. He could not get rid of thoughts about her actions, even realizing that at first he suspected. She wanted to dig up his secrets, noticing his weak starting stats. When he watched her walk away, he came to a different conclusion. Her behavior was her way of caring about someone like him. He thought over his path forward and noticed that now raising basic attributes had become easier. The next goal was clear: to reach level 5 and change class, imagining a magnificent new form and resolutely deciding to become a bishop. His thoughts about the future echoed against the sprawling territories of the academy. Soon he was gathered together with the rest of the students. He was told that today's lesson was field training, and in the dungeon they needed to obtain a certain quota of magic stones. He sighed and resigned himself. It seemed there was nothing to be done. While other students grouped in threes, he was completely left aside and stood alone. Phone. At that moment, a friendly, cheerful voice called him to join. He turned and saw a girl with a high ponytail next to Shinguji Ayano. The girl asked Ayano, and she willingly agreed. Takasugi was stunned. In his thoughts, he only shouted Ayano's name. The blonde girl playfully pointed out his audacity, and he reacted confusedly. Annoyed by the hint, Ayano addressed him and demanded to know what was so scary about her, and another girl quickly intervened, teasingly noting that it was because of her reputation as the Ice Queen, as if she could kill without blinking, and Ayano agreed for now. The tension dissipated. The energetic girl blossomed with a smile and exclaimed that they should name themselves a team. Slightly stunned, Takasugi barely managed to agree, and Ayano quietly watched them both. And so, for some reasons he himself did not fully understand, he found himself in the company of these two girls and moved forward together with them. Together, step by step as they moved on, he immersed himself. He estimated what he was capable of now and weighed his current stats. He ran his status through his eyes: level 3, strength 14, endurance 15, no skills or magic, and although the increase was barely noticeable, he sincerely rejoiced that the basic physical stats finally moved beyond single-digit numbers. He and his new comrades immediately rushed into the dungeon, descending the stone stairs to retrieve him. They walked together, and very quickly, in an instant, they found themselves in a huge hall with massive columns on the 2nd floor of the dungeon. Legend. Looking around the empty space, Shinguji Ayano turned to him with a stern look and ordered him to stay behind because he was weak. Takasugi was taken aback by her sharpness. His surprise was cut short when a huge goblin appeared. The blonde girl laughed, teasing Takasugi because he was scolded, but then added that maybe it was the right F. Paul. He grimaced. Their harsh judgment of him annoyed him. After all, he had just bought a new weapon at the school store and really wanted to try it out. To test it, he pulled out his new sword with a determined expression, a ninja blade of rank E, which could add 30 more damage points. Damage? His companion with a tail noted that the weapon looked good but was useless if he didn't know how to use it. Takasugi replied that he would master it in a moment, but Ayano interrupted and declared that she would go ahead. Before anyone could react, the blonde girl stepped forward and, winking confidently, a large spear with a dark blade appeared in her hand. She instantly spun the weapon, releasing a whirlwind of rapid thrusts that blurred into a circle of deadly points. The barrage of attacks exploded with a powerful lunge forward, pushing the spear's tip straight into the side of the surprised goblin. Her weapon struck precisely, instantly dispatching the goblin in a blurred whirl of motion. As the creature fell, Takasugi stood frozen in stunned silence, his mind racing. He recalled information from strategy. Shinguji family runs a dojo of spear mastery, which is respected among the so-called combat gifted. While he was thinking this over, the blonde girl noted how strong Shungaji must be. Takasugi realized that militarized guilds are essentially outlawed, so Shungaji's connections with people are much more dangerous than ordinary nobles, and this realization was reflected in the dark, tense expression of fear on his face. She returns to Takasugi with a wide, toothy smile and cheerfully remarks that goblins are not a problem, and it looks like he won't have to wait his turn to fight. And yet her cheerful dismissal is interrupted when another goblin suddenly jumps out of the shadows and lunges straight at the unsuspecting Takasugi, and Shinguji desperately screams. The creature's claws grip and scratch at Takasugi's chest, and he lets out a cry of surprise. In pain, despite the shock from the blow, his heart pounds loudly in his ears. He retreats, stumbling, but quickly regains balance, draws his blade, and prepares to confront them. The monster, now he stands ready, gripping the sword firmly with both hands. His face is frozen in pure determination, and blood drips from the weapon. The blade, with a sharp cry, he lunges forward, slicing the goblin's arm. The creature recoils from the strike, and Shinguji watches the clash with sharp calculation. But the monster instantly responds, swinging its other arm and striking Takasugi hard. He howls as he is thrown back, and Shunguji's face twists with clenched teeth, her expression tense. Irritation, fallen to the floor in a torn and blood-soaked uniform, Takasugi rises, propping himself on one elbow. Wounded, he looks up at the enemy, gripping the sword tightly, his spirit unbreakable. He breathes heavily, still recovering from injuries, but clarity dawns on his face. He tightens his grip on the weapon and finally understands the unique combat principles of this world. Damage accumulates from successive attacks, and a single full-strength blow can be devastating. As this thought takes root, the blonde girl nearby, worried, says he is weak and should not overexert himself, and Shinguji Ayano looks at him with the same anxiety. A moment of realization is suddenly and brutally interrupted. Eyes widen, panic bursts forth, quiet repeated gasps escape from lips, and sweat streams down the face. The cause of the horror becomes immediately clear. A huge crowd of goblins appears as if out of thin air, forming a dense, threatening circle around him, Shinguji, and their companion, and the path forward turns into a wall of monsters, cutting them off from other students, among whom Furuta and Ikiju can be seen in the distance. In the spacious, stone-paved courtyard, Takasugi Hanagasaki Rika and the energetic blonde girl stand side by side, completely surrounded by a threatening circle of various monsters. An arrow suddenly thuds dully into the ground just a few centimeters from his foot, and Takasugi breaks out in a cold sweat. His eyes widen in panic. Is he really going to die right here? In response to the inevitable threat, Hanagasaki Rika calmly raises her luxuriously decorated staff. With her eyes closed in concentration, a glowing magical seal appears behind her back as she begins to whisper a spell. She unleashes her power, and the air crackles as huge, sharp ice shards burst from the ground around her, summoned by her incantation. The ice magic surged forward in a devastating wave. A stream of crystalline spikes flew straight at the surrounding monsters, who froze in shock and horror at such overwhelming power. Her icy gale cuts through the ranks of monsters, shattering them completely. When Rake's spell cleared the way, the blonde girl dashed into the thick of the battle. Her weapon was a blurred streak, and she finished off the survivors with swift acrobatic strikes. The blonde girl does not stop her attack's flow, and she clears the field of the last enemies. Wiping her brow, she exclaims that it was a real treat with experience points, and because there were so few other students around, they were able to farm EXP well. Takasugi can only stand and watch, stunned. Finally, he spoke, complaining and irritated. If his two companions kill all the monsters so quickly, he himself will not get any combat practice. Hearing his complaint, Rika turned to him with a critical expression and said that he was stubborn, especially for such a weak person. Her words hurt, but Takasugi becomes even more determined. He says let them laugh as much as they want, because very soon he will become the strongest and leave them in the dust. The blonde girl bursts out laughing, and as the three walk away, Takasugi thinks that despite the chaos, he managed to obtain a common skill from the item chest and finally reach level 5. He and his training partners, Hanagasaki Rika and the girl with the ponytail, ascend the wide stone stairs when a voice roars behind them demanding that they step aside. Before he could fully turn around, a hand sharply shoved him in the chest, and the aggressor dismissively waved him off as if he were nothing. The shove made him stumble backward, and before him stood a trio of arrogant students. Supposedly their leader, a young man with glasses holding a trident, flanked by a girl in a revealing uniform and a boy with long light hair and 2 ponytails. He passed by Takasugi's group with obvious contempt. Remaining behind, his people watch as the arrogant company strides ahead across the academy grounds, leaving a palpable tension behind them. The girl with a ponytail shuddered with disgust and said that a nasty atmosphere was coming from them, and Takasugi, standing between 2 comrades, learns from her that they were students of Class A. Takasugi watches from afar and notices a blonde with a pompadour who sneers contemptuously in their direction. He mentally realizes that, as a person often bullied by hooligans, part of him enjoys this, but he knows well the nobles of this world will never tolerate such insolence from a commoner. Hanagasaki confirms his thoughts. The students of Class A are indeed very arrogant, so it is better to keep away from them. Later, after school, Takasugi sets out alone, heading a bit beyond the river, not far from the academy. The journey leads him to a secluded pool beneath a waterfall, a calm body of water surrounded by steep cliffs and lush trees. He pulls out a freshly bought manju bun from the store and decides to throw this offering directly into the water in front of him. Having thrown the bun into the basin, he knelt on the stones, folded his hands, and prayed fervently, begging for strength. His prayer in the bowl beneath the waterfall was heard. In the mental space before him appears a majestic deity in a mask with flowing robes and hair like flames, and his voice echoes with approval. Good. The vision shatters and Takasugi gasps, surfacing from the water waves spread throughout the base. He raises his gaze, and on his face is the shock of that day, as he realizes this profound spiritual experience. He froze, and suddenly behind him emerges a colossal, shadowy spiritual entity. It is like an echo of the deity from his vision. Its shining eyes look from the darkness. The power has manifested. The test passed. The notification confirmed his new status. He unlocked the Bishop class, the most powerful available at level 5. It grants significant bonuses to HP, strength, magic, and endurance, so it fits perfectly both in the front line and in the rear, and the text also emphasizes. Unlocking it is the hardest. Blessings from 2 deities, Ryujin and Sutsa, are required. After successfully changing class, Takasugi heads to the Research Institute at the Academy and approaches the door with the sign Research Laboratory 301. From the middle appears a young man with tousled light hair, with gobbles on his forehead and delicate tattoos on his neck and arm, turning with curiosity. He notices Takasugi. He stands in the corridor near the laboratory door and nods, letting him know he sees him. The tattooed researcher's face breaks into a smile with sharp teeth. He joyfully exclaims that Takasugi is just in time. He has just finished the prototype of the new emblem and immediately asks if he wants to become his test subject. Without waiting for a full answer, the researcher grabbed Takasugi by the shoulder and pulled him into the laboratory, noticing that there was still space on his skin for ink. Takasugi only barely nodded, and in his thoughts flashed the image of a mad scientist. In his head flashed, he found himself face down on a medical bed, wrists tied to the frame, on the skin a complex dark sign, and the researcher's prototype emblem was already engraved on his upper back. From the restrained position, he looked at the researcher and, surprisingly boldly, began to list the desired abilities: endurance I, speed V, exorcism 4, and even summoning 2 to add them to the correct one. The researcher was initially surprised, but noticeably irritated, and scolded Takasugi. Do not demand everything from the world at once. There is already little empty space on my back for work. With this, his irritation quickly melted away, and he pondered. However, tapping his finger on his chin, he agreed that the combination of abilities Takasugi asked for was actually quite effective. Takasugi remembered that after that short conversation, his consciousness began to fade, and he completely lost consciousness. He woke up a little later, lying peacefully in a bed inside the laboratory. The room was quiet, like a simple hospital ward, only a bed and privacy. Of this screen, pushing the thin blanket aside, he slowly got up. His body finally stopped wandering. Restrained, he got out of bed and, wrapping a towel around his waist, approached the large mirror on the wall to examine himself. Alone, in the mirror he saw the shocking result of the experiment. The emblem was no longer a small mark, it was a huge, exquisite magical pattern that now covered his entire back, a complex tapestry of symbols and lines. He emits a tense groan, eyes wide open in shock as he continues to comprehend the huge inscription on his. The researcher says that he managed to obtain several emblems, ones that are usually impossible to get without special conditions, and that he gave them all for free of charge. Hearing this, Takasugi cast him a look full of understanding and instantly realized, this man must be the inventor of the very remedy that was talked about in the game. Manual. Then he presses the researcher, asking who exactly he is. Before the researcher could answer, Takasugi panics in his head. He urgently needs a good excuse for being here, and he decides to say that he got lost during the tour and was just looking for exit. When he, stammering, barely utters the excuse, the researcher suddenly grabs him by the shoulders with a burning gaze and demands that Takasugi promise not to tell anyone about what happened, especially since he received so many M. His behavior suddenly changes, his face contorts into a terrible mask. He warns Takasugi, although he doesn't care who sees the emblems he requested, Takasugi must never show anyone the huge one that the researcher himself requested. Stakarv completely frightened, Takasugi immediately agrees, promising not to show it. As soon as the promise was confirmed, the researcher's face softened. He thanked Takasugi and asked if his choice of emblem was inspired by something, noting that for an amateur it was too simple. Takasugi replied that it was a spur of the moment idea. However, the researcher sees through the lie. In his thoughts, he notices that out of millions of possible combinations Takasugi chose, they seem to be selected with terrible precision, as if created to handle any situation. He listens as a researcher with wide-open eyes notes in amazement that the abilities chosen by Takasugi seem invented by someone who knows even more about crests than he does. The researcher quickly dismissed this thought as impossible, turned away, and muttered that maybe he himself would have to start studying combinations. Takasugi stands silently, his back now. And now hold on. After some time, night fell over the wide courtyards of the Sakura Academy. The buildings glowed against the darkness. Dark sky. Walking alone along the covered path, Takasugi mentally notes that it has already become dark. He smiles slyly, thinking about his new abilities. Now that he has become a bishop, he can apply healing. Thinking about magic, his thoughts turn to other crests now sewn onto his jacket. Exorcism to remove negative effects, endurance to enhance strength, agility for mobility, and summoning to perform calls. He rejoices inwardly, having acquired all the necessary crests at once, but the joy is cut short. Something grabs his gaze and his face instantly. In alarm, from a square pit in the ground right before him rises a monstrous figure. A tall creature in armor with 2 horns and 4 glowing vertical eyes. Its presence radiates pure true threat. Takasugi froze in horror, only staring wide-eyed, a drop of sweat on his face, and he, stumbling over words, whispered, what is this?" Along the stone paths of the academy creeps a monstrous biomechanical creature. Its horned head and smooth dark body sharply contrast with the mundane surroundings. The creature continues its eerie walk across the territory. From the classroom window, Takashi notices it, his face instantly twisted in genuine shock. He recognizes it. Now outside, Takasugi presses against a tree, sweat running down his face, and he watches as the monster moves with terrible determination. The creature walks across the schoolyard, and it seems the other students, busy with their own affairs, do not notice it at all. Takasugi frantically fumbles with the device and confirms his worst fear. He is sure that this is the same monster from the game that changes shape, devours students, and takes their places. The realization instantly overwhelms him. With a wave of panic, he wonders if the game's embodiment into reality caused some malfunction, due to which an enemy of such level appeared much earlier than it should have. His thoughts involuntarily turn to the game's hero Ikiju Kazumi, and he concludes, even he would not have the strength to defeat this enemy now. Watching the relentless advance of the monsters, a grim conviction settles in him: they cannot be stopped. This terrifying truth means that someone at the school will definitely die, and he just does not know whom the creature will choose as a replacement. He imagines a horrible possibility that the monster's mask will be torn off while it pretends to be a student. From his hiding place, he is gripped by deep fear, knowing that at his current level all that remains is to stand aside and watch. The scene slides into a long, empty, and ominous corridor of the academy, rows of columns stretching into the dark distance. He let out a hoarse scream, his face a mask of tension, and pressing forward continued the attack. The scream was accompanied by a powerful kick. His boots sank into the gelatinous body of the large slimy creature. The blow passed through the monster like a wave. It recoiled with a frightened expression, its single eye wide open. At that moment, a wave of energy passed through his battered body. As if the world itself announced his rise, he leveled up. A quick check in his mind confirmed his new status. Now he is Takasugi Takashi, level 6 and Bishop level 3. Health points sharply jumped to 462, and strength, magical power, and endurance received a significant boost. When he tried to comprehend the change, a voice sounded with alarm and warned him that the boss was dangerous and he should retreat. He turned around and saw Hanagasaki Rikau rushing towards him, her face full of anxiety. He turned back. She asked what he was doing and if he had fought this creature before, and he confidently replied that he had already beaten it more than once. Though a spark of irritation flashed in his mind, he was hurt and even a little indignant that she still considered him weak. His confidence was hard-earned. He recalled those exhausting 10 days, a relentless marathon of hunting and destroying 1,550 slime bosses. These colossal efforts finally raised him to level 6 and more importantly brought loot that finally dropped. He examined the ancient ring, rank C, an item he had to have. It gave a huge 300 to life, 30 to magical power, and reduced received damage by 8 points, perfect for someone who does not want to see defeat. He stands before large closed gates and suddenly finds himself face to face with the Hanagasaki team. Clicking his tongue, he shows his irritation at seeing them again. Hanagasaki grabs his form and angrily says that he should be thanking them. She explains that when they were left behind, they did him a favor by picking him up because everyone else avoids her party due to their high levels. Takasugi is unimpressed, snorts and smiles, asking if she is sure about that, teasing that she is supposedly still grinding on the first floor. Their argument is suddenly interrupted by a low growl echoing down the long corridor between columns, and from the darkness emerges a huge white wolf-like monster with glowing eyes. The beast lunged forward with incredible speed, a white blur of fur and bare fangs, and in an instant, it closed the distance to Takasugi. It pounced, knocking him onto the stone floor, but instead of giving up, Takasugi grabbed the creature's jaw and powerfully struck it right in the face in response. The blow sent the monster flying backward. Hanagasaki watches, frozen in stunned silence. Takasugi gets up, rubs his cheek, and casually says that the beast hit well. He still does not believe it and asks if he has sharpened his weapon. Shunguji Ayano steps forward, excitedly examining the situation. She notices that Takasugi took no damage, has become much stronger, and that his attack power now equals hers. Hanagasaki, embarrassed, denies that he has caught up with her yet. Takasugi smiles crookedly and asks if she thinks his new strength is only because of his weapon. He touches a small scratch on his face and realizes that Hanagasaki noticed something unusual, but is unlikely to interrogate him about the class choice. He is enveloped by a surge of confidence. With such endurance, local monsters won't even be able to touch his HP. Hanagasaki, wounded in pride, declared that their level was stuck and suggested going up to the 3rd floor. She sharply cut off Shinguji, telling her not to put her on the same level as such a weakling as Takasugi, and Shinguji looks worried, as if thinking whether the 3rd floor is still too dangerous for her. When Shinguji admits aloud that she is afraid to rush, Takasugi looks at her and immediately understands everything. She is anxious because on the 3rd floor enemies use magic and probably sees this as a chance to prove that she is still stronger than him in magic. Doman, his face tightens with anxiety. A drop of sweat appears on his temple. He glances alternately at one and then the other companion and asks if any of them have ever really been on the next floor. They walk. The girl with the ponytail warns that going up to a new floor significantly increases the chances of dying. Hanagasaki turns to Takasugi, says that it is also his first time on the 3rd floor, and asks if it is not too early for him. Yet the group of 4 moves further. They enter a huge, cavernous hall supported by rows of massive stone columns. This is the 3rd F. In the open space, 2 grotesque creatures resembling goblins in tattered robes lurk. The larger one, with a strange symbol on its forehead, grips a gnarled staff and its torn, sharp teeth form a threatening smile. The squad is on alert. Suddenly, the larger goblin mage lunges forward, instantly closing the distance, staff raised to strike. Reacting lightning fast, the girl with the ponytail throws herself in front of the team, intercepting the monster's attack. The blow lands with a deafening crash. Her body takes the full force of the magical explosion. The staff pierces her shoulder and she screams in pain. Takasugi stood, eyes wide open in shock at this sudden, brutal end. At her scream, he instantly reaches out his hand to her, and soft, ethereal light begins to gather around his outstretched palm. The light envelops the wound, it instantly disappears, and her skin remains completely unscathed. At the same moment, a complex fiery seal flares up on Takasugi's back, its glow visible even through his jacket. She looks at the healed shoulder and cannot believe her eyes. Takasugi turns his back to her, his face expressionless, and coldly says, "You are weak, so don't push yourself." Himself, the tension that led to such desperate clashes in the dungeons had been building for some time. During expeditions, Takasugi's squad constantly ran into stronger students, a trio from Class C, armed and confident, often appearing to seize territory, shouting for the D-Class small fry to scram from their new hunting ground. On the floor, facing their blatant aggression, he realized fighting was pointless. The Class C students were clearly at least 5 levels stronger, veterans of dungeon raids since school, so he restrained Shingeji Ayano and directly said they couldn't compete against such opponents. Tyrants, and so during their dungeon sessions, harassment from Class C became everywhere. This constant oppression so inflamed the anger towards the upper classes among Class D that it burst out. Students, it was precisely amid this tense atmosphere that a joint swordsmanship lesson was announced for the entire course. In the spacious dojo, students from each class sat lined up in strict rows before the sternage instructor. When the stern, elderly mentor loudly called the next pair, Furuta Masao, a well-known Class C student, let out an audible sound of irritation. His irritation thickened into contempt when he found out who was in front of him, some worthless lackey from Declan's entourage. Class, his disdainful gaze fell on Takasugi, sitting among his peers from Class D. Nearby, the same hooligans from Class C of the dungeon watched with a smug look. Looking up at Furuta's formidable figure, Takasugi instantly understood everything. He realized that Furuta was about to unleash all his accumulated rage on the people from the higher classes A and B. Despite the obvious threat, a faint smile appeared on Takasugi's lips. He knew that people like Furuta probably spent days bowing and sucking up to the elite classes. All this accumulated anger was now bursting to the surface, and he was the appointed target. He froze in a ready stance, eyes fixed on the opponent. On the opposite side, Furuta Masao's face twisted into a sinister smile, and he noted to himself that although the training blades were dulled, the upcoming exchange would still hit his Class D target painfully against the backdrop. Hingasaki Rikase smiled crookedly, and other students watched the confrontation unfolding. On the training ground, Faruti's expression spoiled by disappointment. The opponent clearly did not impress him. Takasugi sees this, but his thoughts go differently. He understands that this is not a threat, but a chance, a perfect opportunity to finally see what the famous naval class really is. "What you are made of?" Inside, determination burst out. A drop of sweat runs down the temple, but a wide, passionate smile blooms on the face. His eyes blaze, and he loudly addresses the opponent and everyone present. "I can't wait to test my strength." In the dojo, a conceited student of Class A with light hair and a crooked smile stands in the flank with 2 accomplices, looking down on the fallen opponent and mercilessly ordering to continue the fight. The beaten student in a hood looks up from the floor, not believing if he really means it. On the side, Takuzu and the old fencing instructor silently watch what is happening. When the smile of the student from a class broadens, Takasugi mentally notes, this is probably their ritual of rank determination. Their open contempt for the teacher clearly indicates the status of a class, and the instructor simply watches silently. The duel resumes. A student in a hood rushes forward, unleashing a fierce barrage of strikes with a large blade, but Takasugi, with a focused expression, parries every attack with his sword. The instructor finally ends the duel and, looking at the student in the hood, coldly says, "No, you lost," explaining that everything was decided the moment he could not resist Takasugi's magic. His opponent can only grit his teeth in helplessness, while on the other side of the dojo, Takasugi, with several cuts on his face, looks at him with a calm, determined expression. The arrogant leader of class disdainfully orders someone to deal with another student who froze in shock, then called the next opponent. After that brutal session, all bruised, Takasugi returns to his Class 1D. He opens the door and sees an atmosphere gloomy as at a funeral, classmates hunched over desks, wounded and broken. He sees them all: Shingeji Ayano, Furuta Masao, Ikiju Kazuma and others, and they all look equally depressed. He learns that the complete defeat of Class D, it turns out, is an annual tradition. He froze in stunned silence. The terrible truth of the situation slowly dawned on him. It seemed the teachers themselves simply turned a blind eye to the systemic discrimination against the students of Class D. While he was sinking into this gloomy thought, suddenly a girl's voice called his name, and he turned around, a slight embarrassment appearing on his face. The voice belonged to Hanagasaki Risai, who stood next to another extremely energetic girl, who cheerfully waved her hand and exclaimed that it had been a long time since they last met. He responded with a blank stare. Her friendliness met his utter bewilderment. Seeing his embarrassment, Hanagasaki gestured towards her companion and asked, "You remember Ematsuki Yoko, right?" Yuko, the one in question, lit up with a cheerful smile. Mine, the name meant nothing to him. Yuko's cheerful expression suddenly shattered into shock. "What?" she shouted. "Did you forget about me? We studied together in middle school." Takasugi could only look back, doubting in his heart whether it was true. This sudden event made his heart pound with anxiety. He so wished these unexpected hidden stories from the past would stop appearing out of nowhere. He stammered, trying to respond. Yuko explained that she had been sick until recently, and with hope asked again, "Did you really forget me?" Her hope instantly turned into tears. "How cruel, Takasugi, you seriously don't understand anything," she sobbed, and he, having run out of patience, sharply cut in. "I don't need lectures about common sense from someone with pink hair." He watched them and muttered to himself that Hanagasaki was sticking her nose into other people's business again. Picking up another lost soul at that very moment, she was explaining to Shinguji Ayano that Amatsuka's low level was due to her absence, and asked Ayano to help as well, saying it was payback for that day. They recorded the profile of Amatsuka Yuko, a fairly popular heroine and specialist in healing magic. Despite her optimism and light character, due to health problems, she has not appeared at school for a month. While a conversation about discrimination against Class D students was about to start in the classroom, Takasugi had already made his decision. He slipped out of the school building alone and headed to the dungeon. He dismissed all other thoughts and focused only on one thing: raising his level. Having this goal in mind, he rushed straight to the 7th floor of the dungeon. Upon arrival, he glanced over the huge, ruined hall of columns that made up the 7th floor. This level has a bad reputation because of its inhabitants. Monsters dwell here, ghosts, spectral beings that can only be defeated by magic. Moreover, zombies and skeletons appear here, and the enemies are known for their powerful spells, so most students simply skip it. However, Takasugi knows the main thing. For a bishop class student, these undead can be laid to rest with a single spell, High Heal. He extends his hand and a dazzling wave of sacred life bursts forth. Light, when it fades, the monsters disappear. He sighs quietly with relief. He stands confidently, running his plan through his mind. When you know where the truly profitable farming spot is, you can't help but think, let them have that stupid war over territory. Meanwhile, the academy building stands peacefully under the daytime sky, and its halls have no idea about the secret battle raging in the dungeon. Below, in the academy, a long-haired student from D class aggressively points at Takasugi, his face twisted with accusation, and loudly declares that it is Takasugi who will drag their entire class down. He doubts this accusation, recalling that the same student had already blamed him for their recent defeat by C class, and Takasugi clearly feels the student wants to make him the scapegoat for all their failures. For years, his thoughts return to the guide Never Quest. He knows from the original game plot that if events are allowed to unfold naturally, a major conflict between classes is inevitable sooner or later. He clearly remembers the future opponent, the class leader, a formidable enemy with mystical eyes, and in Takasugi's mind a threatening image of this leader suddenly flashes, and he firmly admits to himself that he is not even sure if he could defeat him on this level. At the 20th level, thoughts return to reality. Tense classmates are around, and he decides that instead of wasting resources on pointless conflicts, it's better to just level up himself. Now, a long-haired student interrupted his inner monologue, stood right in front of his face, and shouted that their class is only trying not to be despised by the seniors, blaming Takasugi for holding them back. Takasugi calmly cuts in that this student better think about raising his own level if he cares so much, and before the argument could flare up, Ikiju Kazuma intervenes and sternly says that's enough and that fights among themselves will solve nothing. But his words met resistance from Iju and Kiko. She insists that if they don't fight back against Class C even once, the persecutions they suffer will never end. Stop. Takasugi listens and admits to himself the truth of her words. The gap in strength between them and Class C, which has 2 more years of dungeon experience, is not just catchable. He knows that he probably could do it, but he cannot allow anyone to find out about his plan. Strategy guide. This internal dispute is interrupted by an energetic girl with a ponytail. She challenges the passive approach and says that they have already seen talking alone gets nowhere, and with fire in her eyes declares that she is not going to give in to this bullying and wants to aim for. At the very top, the energetic girl with a ponytail continues to express her opinion, having read Shinguji's words as a blunt command, shut up and level up. And while she was speaking, Takasugi silently thought and agreed probably this is the best solution. While the rest of Class D argued about whether to start a fight, he ignored these disputes and instead went to the 7th floor to train and level up, and this process took him only 1 month of solitary training. His dedication paid off fully. Although the official status screen showed level 10 with impressive stats like Magic Power 233 and Sacred Magic V, in reality, during this month he had already grown to level 20. The group enters a new area, a spacious stone hall supported by majestic arches and columns, reminiscent of the underground chambers of the ancient Colosseum. In the hall stood side by side Takasugi Takashi, Hanagasaki Rika, and Amatsuki Yuko. Takasugi now carried a huge two-handed sword, and Hanagasaki was dressed as a mage in a cloak and with an ornate staff. But the huge blade turns out to be a burden. He strains, barely lifting the weapon onto his shoulder. Its weight clearly far exceeds his current strength. Seeing him struggle, Emitsuko apologizes. She feels that all this is for her. Hanagasaki calmly says don't worry, saying that Takasugi seems to enjoy swinging the new weapon against the small cube-shaped creature in the distance anyway. His efforts really paid off. After exhausting grinding on the 7th floor, his once low stats rose to an average level, and he even managed to change his class to Gladiator. The new class Gladiator grants him powerful bonuses: 200 HP, 150 to Strength, and 50 to Dexterity. This is a class that is perfect for physical attack, with easy growth in HP and Strength, but does not develop Endurance or Magic at all, the price for brute power. Although he has become stronger, this floor hardly challenges him. Surrounded by fallen enemies, he realizes that his level will hardly increase here. Even with rented weapons, he easily cuts down opponents, and all he has left is to kill time. His skill did not go unnoticed. Hanagasaki approaches and enthusiastically says that it is impressive how he handles the greatsword and how quickly he progresses. Takasugi is stunned by the praise, but Hanagasaki adds that a lot can change in a few days and asks why he sounds so arrogant, while Amitsuko whispers to her that this improvement seems so big only because he was so bad at first. He is outraged by Hanagasaki's remark and sharply replies that it should not be presented as if he has no talent at all, insisting that he only struggles because of low initial stats. Hanagasaki, unfazed, simply says that he should accept the compliment because initial stats are considered an indicator of talent. While they argue, Emitsuki's progress is impressive. For a beginner to reach level 5 in just half a day is almost incredible, making her a true prodigy. She agrees with Takasugi's assessment of their progress. He notes that leveling up is becoming harder and says they need to go to the 4th floor, and Hanagasaki also agrees, only expressing hope that it will be without problems. He waved off her worries with new confidence, explaining that Ikiju has probably already dealt with any Class C bullies, and added that if any of them get in their way, they will simply defeat them. His bold statement stunned his companions. Hanagasaki asks where he gets such confidence. Amitsuka silently wonders if Takasugi has always been like this, and nearby a student with a pompadour watches silently. The group enters the 4th floor, a huge round hall surrounded by majestic columns and arches. The stone floor still bears the scars of ancient battles. As soon as they stepped into the hall, their eyes immediately fell on a tense confrontation further along the stone path, and Takasugi notices that it seems to be a clash between C and D class students. The scene is outright bullying. A pompadour student from Class C holds a weaker one by the collar, another nearby helplessly cries and stands between them, and Ikizu Kazuma stands up against the bully. Amid the hustle, Takasugi easily jumped onto the high stone terrace above the stage. His comrades looked up in surprise, and he remarked with a sly smile that from here it was easier to see how the drama unfolds. His action draws the attention of another figure who looks down arrogantly and openly despises. A student with cold, threatening eyes says that this zone is too advanced for them and orders them to leave. Unintimidated, Ikiju Kazuma stands his ground alongside his comrades and decisively says, they will pass and if necessary will use force. From his height, Takasugi watches as the hero takes a stand. On the lips of Hanagasaki, his name is Sharp Whisper. A Class A student with mystical eyes smiles ominously, silently consenting to the confrontation. Fine, he says, looking down at the two groups below where Ikiju Kazuma and his partner stand against the mocking Class C students. From his position, Takasugi carefully considers the upcoming fight. He recognizes the leader of Class C, Kiriyama, and the guide says he is level 12, so the difference with Ikiju's group is about 4 levels. He remains confident, implying that if Ikiju is the main character of the game, he should be able to overcome such a gap. But this confidence is instantly shaken by the fact that Kiriyama's group is armed with expensive, high-quality equipment, giving them another clear advantage. When everything is stacked against the hero, he can only hold his breath and watch, aloud asking who will emerge victorious. On the battlefield below, the time for reflection is over. He shouts, draws his blade, and charges forward, with two comrades immediately behind him. The long-haired comrade picks up his battle cry, and the three rush across the stone floor toward the waiting Class C student. Ikiju tears forward, eyes narrowed in concentration. He closes the distance, sword raised high. He brings the blade down with a powerful strike, but it is met by a strong defense. A flash of light bursts out as the sword is parried by the Class C student. Pompadour, that should be enough, Takasugi exclaims in surprise from the side. The force of the strike cracks the stone slabs beneath them, and two fighters are frozen in a deadlock, their blades pressed tightly against each other. Watching the fight, a hooded student from Class C snickers disdainfully, smiles arrogantly, and mocks the efforts. Ha, is that all you're capable of? Takasugi Takashi looks at the dead end and with a heavy heart realizes that even with the rare weapon Ikiju Kazuma cannot break Kiriyama's defense, while his party members watch anxiously nearby. While Takasugi watched, Kiriyama abruptly threw a threat at the spectators, implying that whoever supports Ikiju will also be beaten. Takasugi understood that if he scared the D-class and forced them to act, Ikiju would definitely lose, and a plan began to form in his mind. At that moment, a burst of magical energy enveloped Ikiju, illuminating him with an aura of light, and the spells of enhancement and acceleration took effect, boosting his power and speed. The unexpected intervention exploded with rage in the hooded student from Class C. He sharply turned around and demanded to know who cast that spell. Ikiju himself stood stunned from the sudden kick. While the Class C student boiled with anger, Takasugi pretended to know nothing, whistling indifferently as a drop of sweat trickled down his face. Nearby, Shingeji Ayano looked at him with narrowed, suspicious eyes. He took advantage of the chance. Not knowing where the spell came from, he should have thanked his mysterious patron, and feeling a surge of power, roared that he was ready to respond. Attack! As Ikiju prepared to charge, two of Kiriyama's allies, the student with braids and the one with spiky hair, rushed to intercept him. But before they could intervene, another spell exploded from the side, a huge fireball racing straight at Class C. The blazing projectile forced the hooded student to instantly rush into battle. He charged forward, holding a large bladed weapon ready to meet the attack. He met the spell head-on. His blade cleanly sliced through the fireball and dispersed its magical energy into a swirling vortex of wind and F. In the flames, when his anti-magic blade disperses the last tongues of fire, the hooded student is instantly under attack. Ikiju Kazuma seizes the moment, leaps into the air, and brings his sword down into a powerful strike. Watching the duel unfold, Iju and Kyuko narrow their eyes with fierce determination, while Shingeji Ayano looks on with wide-open eyes. Anxiety, she has already decided. Ijayan lets out a fierce roar and rushes forward, knocking down the rest of the C-class students and scattering them with the force of his advice. Making their way, two other students of Class C suddenly find themselves in flames, screaming in pain as an invisible magical attack takes them. They knock them down. From their position, Takasugi and Shingeji look at the consequences. A boy with spiky hair lies on the ground and smolders. Defeated, the battlefield became clearer. The student in the hood stands his ground, blade at the ready. Opposite him, Shiju and the battered Ijuan is regrouping, preparing for the next phase. Fight. They do not hesitate. They rush into a coordinated assault while Ikiju breaks forward. The student in the hood is eerily calm, looking mockingly at the approaching hero. You fool, he golfs. In response to the mockery, Ikiju releases a powerful spell. Flare burst. He shouts and a huge explosion of fire bursts out, completely engulfing the hooded student, and the force of the impact throws Ikiju into the air. But the destructive stop-cold attack materializes a complex glowing magic circle that absorbs the entire flash. Ijuin can only watch in disbelief, screaming. What? The spell was not cast by the C-class student. Behind him, with an outstretched hand, stands the leader of the A-class. He holds a shield, but suddenly a wave of dark energy attacks from afar and hits Takasugi. Cried out in pain, grabbed his chest, and retreated stunned. With a powerful leap, Ikiju Kazuma instantly closes the distance at his blade, a blurred gleam that decisively strikes the hooded Class C student and knocks the opponent back with the force of the blow. The defeated student collapsed to the ground, and the spectators from Class Diven, the stunned Takasugi and Shinguji, burst into joyful cheers, shouting their victory. Nearby, other members of Class C's team lay beaten and broken. The leader of Class A looked down at the fallen students of Class S and disdainfully cast a curse. Shingeji Ayano noted that defeating the Class S team was still quite impressive, but Takasugi, ignoring this, turned to his comrades and said it was time to go. As soon as the three passed through the stone arch, an angry shout cut from behind. "Hey!" The shout came from a long-haired student of Class D who was being restrained by a classmate. He glared fiercely at Takasugi's group and demanded to know if they really thought they could just leave without doing anything in the fight. He was still furious, loudly shouting that others were the ones risking their bodies. Takasugi turned and coldly said that the student spoke as if he had really done something. In his mind, he thought the fight would have been much easier if this student were more agile. In his thoughts, he admitted it would have been a big problem if he himself had not raised his level. Then he addressed the student directly and reminded him of that early conversation: the whole class needs to raise their level. With a sharp gesture, Takasugi issued a challenge. If the student wanted to repeat the same trick that the Class C student had done, he could try and fight him. The long-haired student froze without words, his face a complete mask of shock. Standing aside, the bully Furuta Masao noticed that Takasugi had become much stronger. The angry Class D student, still being restrained, could only curse at Takasugi while his friend pleaded for him to stop. Takasugi just looked on, expressionless. Leaving the conflict behind, the group moved on and soon came out onto a large open stone plaza marked as the 4th floor. He looked back at his companions, a drop of sweat gleaming on his face. Emitsuka Yuko expressed doubt and asked if it was really okay that there were only 3 of them there, and Shingeji Ayano, always confident, simply said it was fine and that she was with them. Amitsuka transferred her skepticism to Takasugi and asked why he did not believe her, and Shingeji calmly intervened. If Takasugi said it was fine, then it was so, and she was also here to help. Amitsuka reluctantly agreed. The comparison to a girl with an impassive face struck a nerve. Amitsuka's facial expression twisted with anger, a sharp contrast to the indifferent traditional mask that flashed through her mind. Keep in mind, her anger exploded. She shouted at Takasugi, reminding him that his reputation was far from brilliant. She declared that everyone said he was so worthless he couldn't even defeat slime, and she had never let him down. She poked him with her finger and shouted that he was a loser. Takasugi, out of breath, tried to justify himself, explaining that it was a slime boss and it happened when he was only level 1. Shingeji coolly added her version. She was the one who had to protect him in that clash. The argument quiets down as they step into a huge open space. The dungeon floor has turned into a noisy city square with stone cobblestones and market stalls. They continue into a fortified settlement. Tall stone walls decorated with flags bearing the Academy's emblem, a cherry blossom flower, framing a large arched entrance on both sides. Takasugi is glowing with surprise, pointing at the tavern, a resting place, a shop, and even modern vending machines, exclaiming that it seems like they stumbled upon a real town. Such safe zones are usually set up in popular leveling areas to protect explorers, but Takasugi's group does not stop. They pass all the amenities and head straight to the main part of the 4th floor. They march forward decisively, and it immediately pays off. A formidable trio stands in their way, a huge horned monster flanked by 2 smaller henchmen with daggers all ready for battle. When he and his squad encountered the new monstrous threat, Hanigasaki Rika stepped forward. With a confident shout, she extended her hand and released a powerful burst of concentrated energy directly at the horned ogre and his accomplices. The beam of energy flew past the monsters and crashed into the far wall of the corridor with such incredible force that the stone bricks shattered into pieces. However, the first shot was only barely felt. The energy bounced off the wall, exploded among the surprised creatures, and instantly covered them with a blinding flash. Dust and debris scattered into the air and clouded everything. Takasugi complained that he could see nothing and it was hard to fight. Rika stood with her hands still extended after the attack. Kyuli simply told him to deal with it. Hearing her command, Takasugi and Rika rushed into the dust clouds, their blades gleaming as they sliced through the bewildered monster. In a moment the fight was over. Takasugi dropped to his knees, catching his breath amid the carnage, while behind him lay the defeated ogre and his servants motionless. Having cleared the place, the group fell silent. Rika suggested that perhaps it was time to return to the tavern soon, but Shingeji Ayano disagreed. They were gaining so much experience. She wanted to continue a little longer, after which she turned to Takasugi and asked what his current level was. When she spoke, beams of light embraced the team, a sign that everyone had leveled up. Takasugi, looking exhausted, warned that it was only their first day and there was no need to rush, but Shingeji, ignoring him, insisted that Rika state her level. Rika admitted that she had just reached level 9 and was determined to squeeze into level 10 during this session. Her own level remained unknown. The Reiki patient exploded, accused Shingaji of always making her reveal everything while hiding her own secrets, and noted that she hadn't seen her in the dungeon after classes. Probably she was just waving a sword in the mountains. Irritably added that this always happens and that she was not interested in it at all. Emitsuka Yuko cheerfully intervened and announced that it was only her first day, and she was already level 6, although it was getting harder. Takasugi said that his level was a secret because if others tried to copy it and died, it would be a problem, but suddenly Furuta Masao's voice sharply interrupted the conversation with a confident tone and revealed. Obviously, because Takasugi was grinding on the 7th floor. Breaking the tense silence after Faruta's accusation, Emitsuka Yuko points to the nearest building. It is the entrance to the 5th floor. She eagerly suggests checking it out, and Takasugi, looking at the stairs leading down, seems to hesitate. As they approach, a dull, ominous rumbling rises from the stone passage, a hint of the dangers lurking on the next, deeper level of the dungeon. The group continues descending long winding stairs, delving deeper into the unknown among huge, pale tree trunks stretching along the wall. They emerge into a huge underground hall. Massive, twisted roots as thick as columns crawl along the floor and walls, creating a creepy ancient landscape. Their exploration is interrupted. A sudden movement makes them freeze. Takasuga's eyes widen with anxiety. Shingaji and Amatsuka gasp and pure shock. Before them stand two terrible monsters, a huge roaring white wolf and a strange reptilian monster with many eyes. The students are paralyzed with fear and emit frightened cries. Dreams, the head of the lizard-like creature sharply turned toward them, and its grotesque maw like a flower blossomed open, revealing a twisted funnel. Inside, this unnatural sight causes Amatsuka, Shingaji, and Takasugi to scream in pure horror, their faces contorted in. In response, the monster instantly spat a glob of viscous liquid right at the terrified student. The projectile hits the ground and explodes into a sticky web that entangles their legs, and as soon as the white wolf lunges at the immobilized group, Takasugi desperately shouts to everyone to duck. He throws himself forward, sword raised high to intercept the leap of the huge white wolf. With a deafening clang, the blade meets the beast's fangs, barely holding it back as he protects the two girls clinging behind. Behind him, the blow was so powerful that a shockwave swept through the group. Amatsuka screamed in horror, eyes wide with fear, watching Takasugi struggle against the stunning force of the monster. At the same moment, the many-eyed lizard on the opposite side of the chamber makes its move, pouring out a stream of dark, viscous liquid bursting outward. The corrosive spray swiftly flies toward them. Takasugi grits his teeth, tenses, and pulls the girls closer to protect them from the approaching magic. During the attack, he finally realizes how serious it is. The lizard's magical strikes are sneaky and brutal, and he only endured them thanks to his high magical resistance. If he were alone, it probably would have broken through, but with two girls behind, their lives hang by a thread, and at that moment, amid the chaos, a voice cuts through, calling his name and ordering him to slash. Takshi sharply turns his head and sees reinforcements. Furuta Masao with his sword drawn next to Hanagasaki Rieka. Furuta points toward the passage and shouts for them to move there. But the lizard's attack is already in full swing. The black acidic liquid races across the chamber floor at incredible speed, not toward Takasugi's group, but another monster. The acidic spit hits the white wolf monster right during lunch. The beast freezes completely in surprise as the acid splashes on its side. In back, its flesh hisses and dissolves on contact. The wolf recoils in pain, its body devoured by the lizard's powerful attack, a shocking spectacle of a friend's betrayal. Watching this horror, Shinguji and Amatsuka could only freeze in stunned silence, momentarily safe, because one of the attackers had just looking up at the terrifying creature that so easily dealt with another mighty monster. Takasugi comes to a grim conclusion. His face, covered in dirt and sweat, is distorted by despair. The 5th floor is completely beyond their power. Right now, assessing the situation, the group makes a strategic retreat. They return to the 4th floor, spend another 2 hours leveling up to strengthen their forces, and then decide it's time to rest for the night. At the hotel reception, the sincerely smiling owner with luxurious mustaches greets them. When they ask about lodging, he says there is a room, but only one. The innkeeper's words instantly brought an awkward tension. Next to the embarrassed Ayano and defensive Yuko, thoughts race in Takasugi's head, and shock freezes on his face as he realizes what they have gotten into. Chapter 11 begins. A noisy crowd of adventurers and townsfolk has gathered near the large multi-story inn. Festive flags are stretched across the courtyard. It is clear that life is bustling here. Inside, Takasugi Takashi, Shinguji Ayano, and Amatsuki Yuko approach the counter. The owner informed them that he has a free room, but only one. The three of them stand together, the offer hanging in the air. Shingyuji and Amatsuki watch while Takasugi silently considers their limited choice. After a minute of thought, Shingyuji seems to agree with the idea, but Takasugi beats everyone to it. He speaks first and says he will just take a tent and spend the night outside, and his companions look stunned at such a choice. As promised, he settled in a simple tent pitched in the yard. Inside it is empty, only a sleeping bag and a few of his belongings on the ground. He sits and reflects on his condition, acknowledging that he has enough attack and endurance, but the real problem is low agility. Even at level 20, enemies easily lead him in circles, so he concludes either keep leveling up as a gladiator or go to the city to look for the necessary items. Lying in the sleeping bag, he couldn't stop thinking while reading his guide. One thing embarrassed him. Master Tony's guide seemed to insist that agility is a redundant stat. He looks, yawning from fatigue. That guy's intentions are a complete mystery to him. It contradicts his recent disappointments in battle. The battle ended, the riddle was postponed until morning, and under the sign of the Takasugi rest area, he finally falls into a deep sleep in his tent. The next morning, Shingyuji Ayano approaches him with Ijuin Kyoko and Amatsuka Yuko behind her, points to the stain on the uniform the same as yesterday and asks if he is right. Takasugi cuts in that this stain, like paint, does not wash off with water. Ijuin notes that he always helps some oddballs, even though he himself has problems up to his neck. Shingyuji ignores this, encourages him for the day, and says he counts on him, while Amatsuka quietly wonders if she is not one of those oddballs Ijuin mentioned. Standing next to his companions, Takasugi turned to her. Thin traces of recent efforts were still visible on his face, and he asked about the duty attributed to the nobility. Before she could answer, Ijuin Kyuko intervened, doubting whether he really seriously wanted to raise his level. Upwards, she pondered for a long time. It was not easy to answer this. Shingyuji explained that due to the incredible talent of her older brother, the family actually expects little from her. She bitterly told about the family's intentions. They want to give the estate to the brother, and she is considered no more than a pawn in a political marriage. Amatsuki Yuko, who stood nearby and listened, exclaimed that the situation was bad. Shingyuji confirmed that if she does not inherit the estate, she will be cut off from noble duties and only expected to finish with good grades. Takasugi listened silently, and his face hardened. She then openly revealed her personal goal. For the sake of her brother, her father bought from a wealthy American magnate something like conditions for unlocking a certain class, and she thought that her current task was to fulfill these conditions and change her class. The information obtained by the Hingasaki family concerned the Arc Wizard, class of specialization depicted in exquisite multi-layered robes and a fantastic wide-brimmed hat decorated with eyes. She recalled, to unlock it, one must first max out the mage class, then bring the thief class to level 5, after which switch to the sorcerer class, and finally defeat a dragon-like creature alone. This is an extremely dangerous task. Smaller dragons appear only starting from the 20th floor of the dungeon, and in Japan, the highest floor reached is the 28th. This trial is only feasible for top guild aces, such as the formidable students of Class C. Looking at Takasugi, she realized, to maintain the reputation of a nobleman, it seems one has to reach such high floors. He met her gaze. The weight of this challenge was palpable. A picture of the battle flashed in her mind. A lone warrior jumped in the air, blade ready, and the whip-like tail of a fierce dragon could slice the place where he had just been. The very danger of this duel was palpable. He easily deflects the attack of an invisible enemy with his sword. The blade rang out, and he casually threw a short hello to his comrades, while behind him Shingyuji Ayano and Amatsuki Yuko watch with a mixture of admiration and concern. Shingyuji's facial expression changes to complete embarrassment. She directly throws in his face that he doesn't even have a shield and demands to know what cheat he is using to fight so effectively. Before he can answer, Amatsuki Yuko intervenes and says she heard. Swordsmen are weak in defense, warriors in attack, but Takasugi seems to ignore both these flaws. She exclaims that she had long felt something was wrong, especially when the one considered a loser thrives in a place our classmates can't even get close to. Her voice echoes across the stone courtyard as she continues to accuse him. He almost single-handedly deals with everything around, and this observation makes Takasugi shudder as he recalls his earlier, less impressive fight. Her face twisted with amusing confusion as she demanded an explanation of how he can be good both in attack and defense. Shingyuji picked up the interrogation and added that he knocks down enemies with one blow and after taking damage doesn't even need treatment. Cornered, Takasugi turns away, trying to look confident. He smiles mockingly and reminds them that he had previously declared he is the one who will become the strongest. His boasting is shattered by the silent, indifferent looks of Amatsuki and Shingyuji, who continue to scrutinize him closely. Realizing that bluffing no longer works, he finally gives up and admits, even if he wanted to hold back he couldn't. His current performance, he says, is simply because his level is much higher and his stats are in a completely different league than theirs. In the end, the day was a great success. The gladiator class Takasugi reached level 3, Emitsuka level 7, and even Hanagasaki, who was with them, shone with joy after leveling up. When their productive day ended, the group found lodging in a hotel and was ready to rest before the next moment. The next morning, as Takasugi was preparing for the day, he was greeted by Hanagasaki. "Rika, good morning," she said cheerfully. "Looks like you slept well," but Takasugi just froze in surprise. Before him appeared an incredible S. He was stunned by her outfit. Stammering, he demanded to know what kind of strange clothing it was, while she stood before him in such a revealing outfit that almost nothing was left to the imagination, holding a decorated staff. Personnel, she tilted her head, sincerely puzzled by his outburst of emotions. What are you talking about?" she asked, as if not noticing his embarrassed state. Her embarrassment quickly turned into indignant shame when she looked where he was looking. "Hey, where are you looking?" she exclaimed, her cheeks blazing. "You're such a pervert." When Amatsuka Yuko joined him, Takasugi reproached himself for staring so openly. Yuko, looking at Reik as if at a tire, noted that it seemed a bit too bold as. However, Reik passionately defended her choice. "No way," she insisted, explaining that today she was going to try the thief class and her outfit was based on the leader of the range. He sighed, realizing she was one of those who fixate on appearance. He recalled that rangers were a mid-level guild, and whoever she copied, the result was always unsuccessful. Terrible, his disapproval was visible on his face, and she immediately took offense. "What is that supposed to mean?" she shouted. "You want to go home sooner, right? Then let's start leveling up as you want." He wanted. After the quarrel was settled, the fully assembled group Takasugi, still angry Rika, Yuko, Shingyuji Ayano, and Furuta Masao set off through the stone core of the academy. Their passage, and especially Reik's bright outfit, did not go unnoticed. Students, among whom was Ikiju Kazuma, watched, overwhelmed with shock, embarrassment, and admiration as the group passed. When Ikiju Kazuma and the others followed Hanagasaki Rika, Takasachi Takashi stood confused and thought that her new clothes turned out to be a paid package only for download called Beachside Hanagasaki Rika and cost a staggering 4,000 yen, and from the side he reasoned she just looked as if she had lost her M. Her thoughts. Suddenly she turned to him with a questioning expression on her face. "Why are you making me go ahead alone?" she asked, her voice tinged with an irritation. He did not miss a beat. "I'm just pretending not to know you," he said in a calm voice. Reik's face fell in shock, but she quickly recovered and cut in. "Even if I'm on the front line, you have to be that tank." Her complaint was cut off when a small reptilian monster suddenly appeared. With a scream, Reik instantly spun on her heel and rushed toward the creature. She held her staff. She was on guard, but the monster was faster and struck a blow that threw her back and made her stumble. Takasugi watched in horror as she was thrown. But her stumble turned out to be just a slight dizziness. Rika landed perfectly and, shouting confidently, pushed the staff forward, piercing the creature and defeating it with one smooth move. Standing over the fallen enemy, Emitsuka Yuko turned to the sweating Takasugi and asked, "Hey, what's wrong?" He looked away and admitted, "Those jumps distract me. I can't consent." "Focus," Rika heard. "You're a pervert," she shouted, her face blushing. "Just focus on the fight, okay?" Takasugi replied sharply, irritated. "Don't talk nonsense. How am I supposed not to get distracted?" Her anger turned into disappointment. "I'm so disappointed in you," she shouted, turning fully to him. "After you acted so cool yesterday, I started to trust you and thought you had no sinister intentions. You're vile. You made me believe you were different from other guys, and then you." Meanwhile, Takasui stood silently and Yuko quietly chuckled. "I'm actually a little relieved. So you're just an ordinary guy?" Takasui, Rika, blushing and with a barely noticeable smile, threw at him once more. "You really skillfully hide your lustful do." He slices another imp in half while the squad continues clearing the yard between them. Monsters, creating a short pause, he called Hanagasaki Rika and asked to be informed when her thief class reaches level 5 because they will be he. Then, his casual remark made Rika freeze, her face instantly filled with shock, and she asked him to repeat what she just heard, and Takasugi, unsuspecting, could only awkwardly. She sharply turns to him, eyes wide with suspicion, and demanding asks how he could know that love is required to level up her class. Level 5, her question threw him into an internal panic. He realized he had made a serious mistake. Information about the Arc Wizard class was supposed to be strictly secret, and while he searched for an excuse, Rika's voice cut through his thoughts sharp, accusatory, as if she knew much more. This is too much. The sudden change in atmosphere instantly grabs Yoko's attention, and she asks Rika if Takasugi mistreated her again, but Rika does not answer, her gaze fixed on Takasugi. She senses his unnatural nervousness and concludes that he knows much more than necessary. She shortens the distance between them. A cunning smile replaces suspicion. Leaning towards the confused Takasugi, she whispers that she won't betray anyone. It's clear how amused she is by his panicked, feeble excuse that he supposedly just considered 5 a pleasant round number. Under the light of the new dawn, Takasugi Takashi stretches his hands to the sky, gazing at the cityscape and telling himself that he hasn't seen the sun for a long time. Although the fresh air refreshes him, a fleeting memory of Hanagasaki Rika reminds him that he is still tense. He begins to walk down a quiet street, finally deciding to pull himself together and head into the city. He heads to a local eatery with Judon. Its simple facade stands out on the corner. Inside, he enjoys eating a large bowl of food. After finishing, he pauses for a moment with a thoughtful expression, then moves on. He passes through a huge arch with the inscription "Welcome to Dungeon City" and finds himself on a noisy main street full of people. Walking, he suddenly notices something right ahead and raises his eyes with curiosity. He stops, a slight surprise on his face. Before him stands the famous warrior Ijuin Kyoko, dressed in her recognizable armor, and she snorted disdainfully when Takasugi recognized her in the building behind Guild Noir, the headquarters of her guild. He walks down the street lost in thought, trying to collect items by the hint, but they do not appear in the right places, and he begins to suspect that the script was rewritten because he interfered in Akizu's confrontation. His face froze. A disturbing thought arose in his mind. A ghostly image of a mask with 4 eyes appeared before his eyes, and he asked himself whether this is a side effect of the non-player character starting to move on its own. He sat on a low stool in the middle of a sprawling open market, carefully examining goods laid out on patches of cloth, while around him a colorful crowd of travelers and merchants bustled, conducting their business among numerous tents. He precisely follows the instructions of the strategic guide and sets off to the black market to buy a specific dagger, probably a memento from a deceased person, and an exquisite box resembling a safe. He knows that without the guide, such a combination cannot be found. The guide revealed the secret. The dagger is not a weapon, but a real key to the chest. Inside hides the real prize, an amulet of power, a rare item that gives +20 to strength. It can be sold and live off the proceeds for a lifetime, and the guide's plan is simple. Take the necklace, then sell the chest and the dagger. But Takasugi deviates from the script. Instead of selling the amulet, he takes it to the craftsman and asks to exchange it for an amulet of dexterity. The craftsman carefully examines the powerful artifact, intrigued by such an unusual offer. The craftsman is stunned, pointing out that the amulet of power is much more valuable. Takasugi, without blinking, insists on the deal and even asks to add the Ring of Atonement. He knows that the dagger for 50 coins and the safe for 1,200 just brought items worth about 20,000. The craftsman doubts and says that the ring saves from stun only once, but seeing Takasugi's determination, he yields, agrees to the deal, and adds a mana elixir as a bonus, for which Takasugi thanks him. Securing the new equipment, he sets off to the next goal, treasure hunting, and heads to a place he had scouted earlier, hidden behind the Guildmore building. His path leads to a small shrine on lands that once belonged to another guild. They say that in this forgotten place hides the legendary phantom katana. A barely noticeable gleam reflects on the shrine's roof. He approaches the shrine, quietly saying, "Excuse me," as he knows the roof should open and reveal the katana hidden inside. From the side, just as he was about to act, a calm voice from behind asked if he had a minute. He sharply turned, stunned, and saw Hanagasaki Rika. "What are you doing here?" he blurted, shocked by her sudden appearance. He quickly tried to defuse the situation, insisting it was just a misunderstanding and that he had no intention of entering the shrine. But Hanagasaki Rika did not believe him. Her face was stern. She noticed he looked like he was about to do something he shouldn't, and threw a chilling warning. "In Guildmore lands, trespassers do not come out alive." Her words made him sweat. Thoughts raced. He had to hurry and take what he came for before the Noir Guild members returned from the expedition. Seeing his embarrassment, Rika softened a bit and suggested going to a cafe to talk, admitting she had a request, and Takasugi, still irritated, just said to simply say what she needed to write there. Then she finally voiced her request. She wanted to know if there was a shortcut to unlock the powerful witch class. Takasugi said that the requirements for the witch class were not accidental and revealed the secret. The fastest way is to transfer to the witch class and level it up to the maximum. and to unlock it, one must undergo a ritual of unity with the snake statue in the temple, because snakes are considered servants of demons, and a witch is a woman who gains demonic power through such unity. Stunned by the strange instruction, Rieka asked if he was laughing at her. Takasugi, with a serious expression, insisted that he was not, said that this was the only advice he could give, and that he was ready to reward her for it. He just asked her to go with him on a true try it. He waved his hand toward the stone snake statue, repeated the advice once more, turned away from her and left, leaving the embarrassed lover trying to make sense of his words. Rieka stood with her arms crossed, looking thoughtfully, and Takasugi took the opportunity. He returned to the small wooden shrine and pulled out a hidden drawer in one of its compartments. In the secret compartment lay his loot. He reached in and grabbed the hilt of the katana, drawing the weapon for. The phantom katana instantly flared in his hands, a swirling fiery aura spinning around it as he raised it before him. A look of grim satisfaction warmed his face. Now he had Kotsu, the legendary blade. He knew well that such a weapon is usually obtained only after joining Gilmore. Still holding the weapon in his hand, he drew it from its sheath with one quick, smooth motion. The steel whispered as it met the air, but his brief excitement instantly shattered. His head sharply turned to the side, eyes wide open from a sudden sharp. Behind the adjacent wall, someone was watching him. A figure stood near the torii of the shrine, the face hidden behind a strange, beaked mask. Suddenly it dawned on him, someone was here and they were approaching. Without hesitating for a second, he dashed, pushing off from the sanctuary and sprinted desperately towards sea. Cover, the figure in the mask broke out of hiding, and Takasugi dashed to the neighboring wall, using the momentum to continue his escape. He raced across the roof, but his pursuer was shockingly fast and stayed right behind him, and the masked one looked surprised by his speed. The chase led him into a narrow alley where he finally stopped, out of breath. With a new scratch on his cheek, he had managed to lose the pursuer. For now, looking back at the street, he put it all together. The one who stood guard and found him so quickly was probably a bandit who sensed his presence. Skill, the last chase exhausted him, and having lost the desire to search the city further, he decided to rest and check on Hanagasaki, who was heading to the local. Reaching the top of the stairs, he freezes on the other side of the tiled square before him. An unexpected scene unfolds. Courtyard before him, Hanagasaki is for some unknown reason entangled in the embrace of a massive stone serpent, struggling to break free. Herself, you just stand there, confused, a little sweaty, and watch the bizarre. They are visible. Recovering from the shock, he approaches the statue where Hanagasaki is still imprisoned with trepidation. Kotsu now. She immediately notices him by the hip and, blushing, accuses him of luring her into this mess. He stammers, completely stunned. Accusation, he regains some composure and begins advising her not to rush to doubt others, but, glancing at Trail's office, he finds her utterly absurd. Struggle. Without warning, he grabs the stone tail of the snake and pulls sharply. Hanagasaki exclaims in surprise and demands that he stops. She calls him crazy and warns of danger, but he asks her not to struggle. He mutters to himself, realizing that this simple movement is not enough to fulfill some invisible condition, and decides to give her a more direct hand. When his hand touches to help her break free, she lets out a sharp scream. He freezes, his face shocked. He accidentally touched her in the PR. He stammers and apologizes, his face flushed red. He admits that during the chaotic attempt to free her, he accidentally peeked. Hanagasaki, still pressed against the snake statue, lets out a sharp, embarrassed cry. Her face burns with humiliation, eyes wide open in disbelief at this humiliating situation. With a surge of determination, she breaks free from the statue with a dull thud. Enough, she says, turning away from Takasugi. I'm leaving. She stormed off in anger, but suddenly stops and turns back, shouting encouraging words mixed with instructions. She asks him not to give up after one try and adds that to unlock the Arc Wizard class, he first needs to unlock the Witch class and raise it to F. To level 10, a storm of conflicting emotions plays across her face: anger, embarrassment, and determination. Finally, snorting in offense, she turns and walks away resolutely, leaving Takasugi. Watching her leave, he freezes in place, completely speechless and sweating, trying to make sense of this whirlwind. After those events, later in one of the buildings of the Great Academy, Takasugi sits at his desk, engrossed in a book, while the previous incident still weighs on him. His attention is broken when Hanagasaki suddenly appears by his desk and calls him by name. Takashi, covering a barely noticeable smile with her hand, she reports with relief and admiration. She adds, a sincere smile playing on her lips, proof that the method he told her about worked, and behind her stretches the shadow of a powerful mage, hinting at the new class she now has unlocked. To express gratitude, she leans so close that their faces almost touch. She whispers if he wants some reward. Overwhelmed by her closeness, blushing Takasugi can only stammer and whisper that he is glad everything worked out. Hanagasaki Rika looks directly at Takasugi Takashi, and he, in stunned surprise, looks around and asks if this is a gift as a token of gratitude. In response, she raises her offering with a confident smile. A dazzling light bursts from her hands, and a wing-adorned staff appears in her palms. The item turned out to be an angelic staff, a weapon of rare rank. Takasugi grabs the staff, sweats from its weight, and immediately realizes this is yet another incredibly expensive item. He quickly tries to refuse, insists that he does not need a gift. Reika does not back down, firmly says that as a noblewoman her honor requires giving something in return. She explains that her father bought this staff because of her abilities, and since he has just arrived, he should take it. When he still hesitated, she suggested another option, 22 Spectre coins. At these words, Takasugi's face changed. He paused for a moment, then made a counteroffer. He would accept the contract to summon Spectre. His request completely caught Reika off guard. She stared at him, at the phantom coin, and at the handwritten scroll, thinking to herself that his demand was absurd. She began tapping on the device and quickly explaining, "The coins fall on the 7th floor, but they are not sold in the city. She already has 77, needs to find 23 more," and Takasugi listens attentively with a thoughtful expression on his face. A few taps and her device confirms that the transaction for 23 Spectre coins is complete. Reika estimates each is about 100 yen and thinks she owes him exactly that much. Takasugi confirms that he is confident in the deal. When Reika asks why he needs the coins, he says it is his secret, and inwardly rejoices relief to realize he has found a way to get the rest, remembering that the Spectre contract can also be obtained by exchanging 100 coins, and marvels at the nobleman's effortless wealth. His plan worked, and he headed to the designated plaza, the 7th floor of the dungeon. There, in the secluded room, he found the hidden altar he was looking for. Before him stood a large, formidable stone idol. He approached the altar and, with the clatter of metal, poured the collected coins into a wide, shallow bowl placed before the statue. He checked the count to himself once more. From the coins he received from Hanagasaki, he had exactly 100. He put them all into the container, ready to begin. Again, as soon as the last coin settled, a thick column of black smoke burst from the bowl, engulfing the offering. When the smoke cleared, there was one contract in the bowl. Wasting no time, Takasugi grabbed the parchment, wrote his name on it, and sealed the pact. In a moment, a colossal hooded figure emerged from the shadows and loomed over him with its oppressive presence. His eyes widened with awe and admiration. He summoned a phantom skeleton. Before he could give any command, the newly summoned creature let out a silent roar and dashed forward, disappearing into the darkness of the dungeon. Suddenly he recalled a crucial fact. Phantoms are extremely aggressive and hard to control, and when one vanished, rushing to find the enemy, he panicked and shouted, "Stop! Hey, where are you going?" Growing up, he stood alone in the dungeon corridor and suddenly felt the connection with the summoned skeleton break. It had probably rushed into battle and was defeated, and he remembered a strange detail about the summoning technique. Spectre Call has a 1 in 256 chance to yield a different result. The spell appeared before him. Instead of a skeleton, a huge shadowy ghost with many eyes materialized from the dark mist, and its gaping maw twisted into a smile. Takasugi fell to his knees and fired. When the small imp-like creature lunged forward, its claws simply passed through the phantom's ethereal body, and Takasugi instantly understood what this meant. On the 4th floor, where enemies rely on physical attacks, his newly summoned creature was practically invincible. Principal, the ghost wrapped and crushed the little devil. When it tried to flee, Takasugi realized what a lucky chance it was. As long as his mana lasted, the ghost itself would gain experience. For him, the frame shifts on the counter lies a huge pile of magical stones. This was his source of funds, but the amount received turned out to be less than he had hoped. In a flashback, he anxiously explains to Shungaji Ayano that he sold a wholesale batch of magical stones to gather the necessary capital. He continues the story. He tells her that after the sale he returned to the dormitory, ate late, and exhausted almost immediately fell asleep. Ayano listens silently, her face showing a working expression. The memory ends with an image of the academy dormitories where he rests. He was arrested, and the story suddenly shifts to the present, to a fencing lesson where Takasugi finds himself in a fierce clash with his opponent Sato, who fiercely accuses him of copying. Takasugi, sweating, denies and insists that this ability was his from beginning to end. Sato smiled and, threateningly raising his sword, stepped forward to strike. Takasugi mentally noted that in this class his usual opponent was Sato himself, and guessed that he, realizing that fire magic was useless here, somehow obtained the same seal that destroys demons, which he also had. While his opponent Sato sparred on the training ground, Takasugi suddenly got distracted. His gaze caught another student with an overly aggressive style. Swing, his gaze shifted to Sato. A girl in academy uniform approached him. She extended her hand to his hand, on which a Copped emblem was visible, and from her came a faint, particle-like glow. He watched that interaction, and as if a wave of familiarity washed over him, he was sure he had seen that girl somewhere before. His gaze stubbornly fixed on the pair. His mind raced, trying to recognize her while she continued standing before him. Arrival, in a moment the same girl was already standing right in front of Takasugi. With a sincere expression, she apologized for her sharpness even before he could ask her ko. He looks confused when she asks why she was paired with Seidu, and quickly adds that it's not because he considers him weak, but her explanation is cut off because some student behind lets out a training shout. In the background, she continues, hinting that it would suit her better to be paired with someone like Kandu or Sarazawa, emphasizing that they supposedly are more skilled. When she bowed her head and apologized for the late introduction, the last piece of the puzzle clicked for Takasugi. He was struck by recognition, and he realized, she is the girl from. She comes out of the shop, straightens up, and solemnly calls herself the Seiin Jiren. Takasugi reads in her eyes a request not to disclose anything from the shop, and she quickly apologizes for the excess. She walks, he is silent, his gaze fixed on the A-class emblem on her sleeve. For a person of such a high rank, he thinks she is strangely gentle. He tries to deny it, saying that you cannot determine his strength by the things someone sells. Seonji calmly agrees but admits that he can say on which floor of the dungeon he was F. Often coming there, she continues to analyze it in her head, recalling how he took money for his things in the shop and put it in his pocket without even checking. Combining that amount with his lightning-fast monster killing speed, she says she gets a fairly accurate idea of his true strength, and her conclusion is stunning. He must have farmed on that floor completely alone. The accuracy of her assessment strikes him, and he mentally cannot understand how she, just by looking at the magic stones, guessed on which floor he was. She knows farts. This is too much. He is stunned. An ordinary student figured him out so easily. He could expect such insight from researchers in the laboratory, but not. He looks for a plausible excuse, suggesting that the magic stones might have been bought just to show off, but immediately rejects this idea, saying that someone like her would not try to impress someone like him, who can barely measure. Catching his thoughts, she smiled and explained, "Although they might think I am not very knowledgeable, I understand things perfectly. My father always taught me to have a sharp eye for people because someday I plan to take over his business and run the shop." Herself, she admits that his unspoken excuse might be valid, but her intuition whispers something completely different. She looks him straight in the eyes and says she cannot shake the feeling that something. It meant more to him. Their conversation is cut off because the fencing teacher shouted at Seienji that the lesson is starting, and Takasugi panics inside how to divert her from the trail now. He fears that if she knows so much, then maybe she could, judging by the size of their magical F. Stones. Later, the school corridor stands empty. In silence, he, stumbling, steps back after the previous clash, hitting his hand against the wall to steady himself. His mind is still dizzy. He hasn't yet recovered when Hanagasaki Rieka corners him, her face tense, and in a sharp, possessive tone she demands to know who that girl he just. They were standing right in the middle of the school corridor. Rieka presses him, saying they seemed very close, and Takasugi quickly denies, insisting that he had just spoken with her exactly. For the first time, he waves his hands disdainfully and asks what this sudden interrogation is. A smile playing on his face, he teases her, asks if she is jealous, and says that if so, she should show it with more charm and less bloodlust. Her calm instantly shatters. Rieka's face burns a deep red, her eyes wide open, a mixture of rage and embarrassment. Standing in the doorway, she shouts back, completely flustered, demanding to know what he is even saying and why he could think that. Just imagine. Takasugi presses further and asks why she is so concerned, and in panic Rieka blurts out that of course she would say something if her future subordinate were to fall into the trap of some strange girl. This accidental phrase enraged her even more, and she screamed that she would kill him, leaving Takasugi stunned and silence hung in the air, the threat still resonating around when a mocking voice suddenly bursts in. A blonde girl with curls, arms crossed, and a confident expression asks Rieka if she is putting this fool in his place. In company, Takasugi instantly recognizes the newcomer. To himself, he thinks that this blonde with curly hair is not from a particularly large family, but has a superiority complex bigger than someone else. Caught between the smoldering anger of Rieka and the superior smile of the blonde, Takasugi can only think to himself that this has become quite A rather fierce clash, and immediately before him appears a blonde with curls, who points at him with a finger and reproaches him for overly familiar behavior with Lady Hangasaki, declaring that such a scoundrel has no right to speak with her. Turning to Rieka, she offers to teach Takasugi a lesson. On her behalf, her superiority involuntarily makes his hand clench the sword hilt. He mentally feels that her obsession with status hits him deeply, probably because he grew up in a country without such a strict, harsh class system. His face darkened to icy fury. Lowering his gaze, he quietly and threateningly warns her, "Choose your next words." Very carefully, the power of his threat stunned the girl. She immediately fell silent, and he continued, venom audible in his voice, "As soon as he draws the blade, her precious status will not save her. Protection against bleeding." Even before the confrontation could escalate, a strong hand grabbed him by the shoulder from behind. Ichiju Kazuma appeared, scolding for yet another trouble, and Takasugi's face turned into a mask of pure rage. The interruption did nothing to extinguish the smoldering and blazing fury in his eyes. With a sudden, unexpected movement, Ichiju kicked the blonde's ankle and knocked her down. She screamed, losing balance, and fell backward right onto the still enraged Takasugi. While the girl stumbles, Ikizu gathers Furuto, Maso, Iju, and Kiko nearby. As if not noticing the chaos he himself caused, he calls Takasugi and asks to talk for a moment. The request caught Takasugi by surprise and momentarily shook his resolve.